I was selected based on my contributions to Inspiration 4, as well as my test background and my, flying background. And then we started our training for Polaris Dawn.
Dragon SpaceX for high apogee.
Go SpaceX.
Dragon, you've soared to over 1,400 kilometers, and you're farther from Earth than any other person since the last Apollo mission over 50 years ago.
Copy that, SpaceX. We all look forward to our friends to take us to even greater heights.
Well said, Dragon.
From launch, it's like the slow-mo, engines light off, 1.7 million pounds of thrust, 9 Merlin engines. It lifts you off and you accelerate. And you build up to that 4.5 Gs, to about 2.5 minute point. That's when MECO happens, main engine cutoff.
Preparing for MECO.
And that's a very violent experience because you're thrust forward in your seat, you're hanging on your straps, second stage lights, boom, you're back in your seat, and now it's 6 minutes. And you're in space. And now you're floating for the next 5 days.
And that's a zero gravity feeling, isn't it?
That's the zero gravity, and it's pretty effed up.
Hi, everybody. So the two experiments that I really enjoyed participating in, first off, the LEO plant.
It hits you when you first look at Earth, when you get a chance to get out of your suit and get up to the window and check out what the planet looks like. And people talk about the overview effect, and it's literally a cognitive shift that happens in your brain. And it impacts everyone differently, whether it's intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. It's something I hope more people get to experience because it's really difficult to describe. And I'm not making this shit up. It's just this radiant glow that comes from the planet.
I'm assuming you've met him.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression?
I like Elon. He's a great guy. He's very engaging. We've had dinner a couple times. He's thinking on so many levels. He's a visionary. He's tireless. Once we get to the lunar surface, it's going to be an easier process to continue this on and eventually get to Mars. We're human. We have curiosity. Why not?
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, member of the SpaceX International Flight number 347 Polaris Dawn, which happens to be the highest Dragon mission to date, which was 1,408 kilometers above Earth. He's completed 15 Ironman triathlons, 4 Ironman World Championships, which I think highlights the crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Scott "Kid" Poteet.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I just saw you on Sean's show, and I didn't realize that we had double booked you basically when we had already scheduled the show, and then I saw you go on there. I was like, fuck me. We try to coordinate sometimes if we have the same guest on. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what's well, I guess before I ask you kind of the normal lightning rod questions, this Blue Origin mission that just came out, I'm curious to get your take on that. I've seen some stuff about it being fake. I guess, do you think it's stuff like that as kind of commercial space flights become more mainstream or accepted or whatever? I'm curious, as somebody who's spent so many years professionally doing what you do, like, does it rub you the wrong way? Are you excited to see that kind of mainstream publicity? What's your take on it?
I would say in the beginning, it kind of did, because I had the old school mindset of NASA, Russia, China. Those were the big organizations that were going to space. That traditional thought process. But what I've experienced over the last couple of years with SpaceX and what we're trying to accomplish in the commercial space exploration industry, I have a different viewpoint now. And I think honestly, it's benefits us as a whole because it's inspirational. They came from very diverse backgrounds. They have their modalities and their categories and industries that they're a big part of with a lot of influence. And so it's just going to inspire the next generation to want to check out and explore, what space is all about, where they may have not been exposed to it previously. So I think it's just this mindset shift that we're going through as a culture on what it looks like to explore the final frontier, with honestly commercial at the helm. These are suborbital missions. So the idea, it's a very similar profile to what Alan Shepard did in the very beginning with Project Mercury, going up, touching space, and coming back down. And there is a place for that. Low Earth orbit is going to be a big part of space economy in the future. But there's also, it's a wide spectrum. There's also the developmental stuff, the stuff that we were involved with, that NASA does with the ISS, with us going back to the lunar surface, and our desires and goals to go to Mars. That's the heavy lift stuff that obviously needs to be addressed and focus a lot of resources and priorities towards. I enjoyed being a part of the mission that I was involved with because it was a developmental test program. So we were taking risks and doing some cool shit. But back to your question, yes, I do think it's important, and it's just, what is its purpose? It's tourism. It's to inspire those that might not otherwise be exposed to this type of industry. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, I appreciate the kind of open-mindedness. I guess I am curious. I mean, is there at least some concern, or obviously there's a concern. Do you think that there's a similar probability for a mishap similar to the Titan submersible, with putting people who, really have no background other than whatever crash course they give them? I get that they're not going all the way, outside into the depths where danger and probability for catastrophe is exponentially magnified, but there's still a lot of danger in something like that. Do you think that it's a similar level of risk?
I don't think it's at that level, in my opinion. I think there's enough checks and balances that we have in place right now, and we're still figuring out as a country, as a government. Is NASA going to take on the role of like an FAA? Because right now it's controlled by the FAA, as far as how the approvals and regulations to get these execute these types of missions. So I think as long as we do have some of that oversight, I have issues with how government has a little bit too much control at times, but there's inherent risk in a lot of things we do. So it's obviously not zero, but we can't afford to have that type of mishap. Yeah. That's the reason why our program, our original launch date was 2 years prior to the actual launch date. And it was because we could not afford to have a mishap. It would have set back the entire industry in space exploration years. So it's mainstream. It's on the news. You see it constantly with a lot of these launches. There's a lot of launches that aren't covered, which is pretty wild to think about. With SpaceX launching rockets every couple days, and all these other companies that are coming along. But I hope we're in a place where we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to that point, I guess, looking back at, as early as I can remember, which I remember the Challenger disaster, when I was in elementary school watching it, live, and but before then, and especially subsequently, those checks and balances within space programs is, as thorough as it seems like it could be, where you see delays for days, weeks, months, for very, very minor things, which, in that Titan submersible, it seemed pretty Wild West, fly by the seat of their pants, or what. There wasn't a lot of oversight there. there is still that concern, I guess, that I would have, in that it only takes one really small thing that, as you increase elevation, just can go, horribly, horribly wrong. And, it seems like such a dicey thing. But hey guys, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage, with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top-tier members, you get the same Mic Drop Challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never, ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you.
Since the Civil War, dogs have stood alongside our military, proving to be indispensable partners. Our military prioritized ensuring proper canine nutrition for optimal performance, recognizing its vital role in mission success. Team Dog embodies that standard, offering science-based, customizable meal plans tailored to your dog's unique needs. Developed by a former Navy SEAL and canine trainer, Team Dog Food ensures the highest quality nutrition for our canine companions. Improve your dog's well-being. Be your dog's hero with Team Dog.
I am curious. I typically like to do kind of a lightning round, just a couple of general questions. One thing I like to ask everybody is what the last full book that you've read is.
Last full book. I would be lying to you to say that I'm a well-read individual. I don't have the attention span.
That's reassuring.
I would say probably the Dragon Operator's Manual is the last book I read.
Does that count?
I spend a lot of time watching documentaries.
Yeah. All right, what's the last documentary you watched?
I was watching Lance Armstrong's documentary on the flight here. Really cool one called Icarus. Oh, yeah. About, I don't know if you're familiar.
I haven't seen that. I did read It's Not About the Bike 20-some years ago when it came out, which is actually one of my favorite books. I think it's such a cool story. I mean, all of the controversy aside, still a very inspiring guy. I'd love to have him on sometime. But what's something you wish you were better at, other than maybe reading attention span?
Oh, man, I wish I had more patience.
Again, that's not super reassuring.
It's
coming from a guy who spends 10 hours in a race.
Yep.
Right. Have you gone sub 10?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an impressive feat by itself. I mean, finishing one is an impressive feat.
Are you versed in the Ironman world?
A little bit. So, one of my best friends for over 20 years now, we served together and did multiple platoons in the SEAL teams. He actually completed Ironman New Zealand.
Yep.
But trained for it while we were on deployment, and it was a ship deployment. So he had the bike that he used for the race on a stationary spinner, and then a treadmill, and they were side by side. And he didn't swim. He grew up swimming, so that was by far his strongest suit to begin with, and arguably, you tell me, probably the easiest of the three since it's first and shortest. But
it's an hour out of the
but yeah, I mean, hats off to him. Shane Hyatt is his name. He's been on the show a couple of times, but yeah, he spent 6 months in an ISU 90 mill van on a ship, pedaling and fucking running, getting ready, and then he did finish it. I don't remember. I think his time was 11 or maybe 12 hours, but did finish it, and it was a hell of an experience. So I've always been fascinated by it, even growing up. I remember in the 80s as it became more and more popular, particularly the World Championship at Kona. I paid attention to it. I wouldn't say that I could list the top 10 best people or anything, but I do find it fascinating, and I've done some team competitions in the half Ironman, where I was usually the runner because that was my strongest suit. But it sure as fuck isn't now. But I do find it fascinating. Here's one that again I always really like asking this question because it's such a wide swath of answers. But if time travel were possible, where and when would you go and why?
Time travel was possible. Where would I go?
And you can witness it or be a part of it. And it's forward or back.
I'd have to be a part of it. Being a pilot, I would say, and just based on the experiences that I've had flying the F-16 in combat and doing the Thunderbirds, different types of flying experiences, I would say flying the P-51. During World War II, the dogfighting, the pure stick and rudder, gun only. You're in a phone booth with a knife type fighting. Versus now, it's a lot of, if you're seeing, it's usually too late. It's all beyond visual range type engagements, sensors, radars, and hundreds of miles kind of engagements. Whereas P-51 back in World War II, pretty badass.
Yeah.
Part of the greatest generation. There's a lot of benefits. It's hard living. We don't have the comforts that we have now back then, but a lot simpler, I think, than what our kids are having to deal with.
For sure. There's a strange, I don't know if you would even call it nostalgia since I wasn't around then, but that I find thinking about the World War II time frame and even the 50s and early 60s that just seemed like it was kind of the pinnacle of the United States. Not to say that it's a shithole now, but there's just something about that time period that I find really, really fascinating.
I think of like the movie The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
Back with Mercury 7, the 50s, the test pilot world, that transition from the 40s into the 50s,
For sure, yeah. Is it safe to say Chuck Yeager is a personal hero of yours?
Yeah, we met him.
Really?
I met him at, I was the commander of the Air Force aggressors. So we replicate the bad guys, Chinese and Russian tactics, out of Vegas. And he came for a function, so I got to meet him, which was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. That makes me curious. How do you train for being the aggressor? Like, are you studying engagements with those, the few that exist, and trying to copy those tactics, or how does that work?
So it's just all the research that we've done. It goes way back to the Red Eagles when we had MiGs. It was dark world programs, exploit their tactics and intelligence gathered to be able to figure out, okay, how do they execute their tactics, techniques, and procedures? It really caught wind in following the Vietnam War, when we had some losses that we didn't anticipate and we had to figure out and solve, so we came up with the red flag exercises, the big coalition, hosted out of Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, where all our coalition partners come, big, huge exercises, hundreds of aircraft. And that's where the aggressors are based out of. So when you get assigned to that unit, your sole purpose in life is to be the training aid, to help your brothers and sisters train. F-16s, now they have F-35s, dumbed down F-35s to provide that 5th gen threat. Weapons school is there as well, which is the Air Force version of Top Gun. So your sole purpose is just to fly the F-16 like someone would fly the MiG-29 or the Su-30 or some other type of platform.
Do you find that there's, and I don't mean to knock your age because we're not far off in age, but from, we'll say, our generation of pilots that tend to prefer the F-16, F-14 more analog type of experience versus the 5th gen stuff, the same way, say, guys in my age bracket prefer a manual analog transmission in a sports car versus the super electronic based.
My kid just asked if he can get a manual.
Yeah, well, that's
like,
rude.
yeah,
That's awesome.
There we go.
Yeah, that's a proud dad moment.
I think this is a standard weapons school answer. It just depends. It depends on what your grading criteria is.
For the pure enjoyment of the activity of flying.
F-16, hands down. But that's what I flew for 20 years. So it's like I'm biased.
Sure.
I've flown an F-15, F-18, F-16, P-51. I just love the feel of the F-16. And, when I flew for the Thunderbirds, you're flying 3 times almost as much hours per year, but you're not doing any of the employment. You're simply flying formation, stick and rudder, pure skill, or hand-eye coordination stuff. Whereas when you're flying combat, it's a lot of sensor operating skills. And to have that experience, you get so good at it. Anyone could, with a little bit of competency, with that much of exposure and experience could get to that skill level. But you just get so comfortable, and it's such a fun aircraft. It's so responsive, you can correct things with the throttle. Versus some of those older aircraft, a little more finesse is required because they're underpowered. I've never flown an F-35, F-22, so I can't compare it to those types of platforms. Yeah. But I can only imagine with the thrust vectoring and the additional power, it's
pretty legendary. I could have looked this up and should have. I just didn't think of it until just now. But with the F-16, to my knowledge, being the only single-engine fighter plane that is still in existence to any degree, is that a correct assumption?
As far as the older aircraft, yes, F-18, 14, yeah. 18,
I mean, even now, I guess, aren't the 35 and 22 both dual?
F-35 single.
Oh, is it? I guess, I mean, is there a higher incidence of, if your only engine fails, that's it. Unlike a dual, like, kind of the classic scene from Top Gun where, engine 1 is out or whatever, and they still manage to fly. Like, is that a concern? Is that anything you really think about or not really?
Absolutely. In fact, my last deployment, Afghanistan, 2015, is the height of ISIS not height. It was plateaued. It was a concern. ISIS, ISK. And it was just like, okay, there's one thing if you get shot down, get hit with AAA or something like that, whatever small arms they had. But single engine is obviously a concern. It's very reliable, Pratt & Whitney, GE engines. Flown it for 20 years, never had any issues. But it's still single engine aircraft. And if it fails or falters, you're getting out of that aircraft. And you got to deal with the circumstances. Yeah.
If you love talk radio, podcasts, and news, the C. Crane CC Radio 3 delivers exceptional spoken word audio. With separate bass and treble controls, you can tune the sound exactly how you like it, and the clarity makes it feel like your favorite host is right there in the room. C. Crane is a returning sponsor on the podcast. Previously, they sent me their Skywave SSB2 to try out, and now that they've sent their new CC Radio 3 over, I can tell you for sure that it's awesome. The CC Radio 3 pulls in long-range AM/FM stations with exceptional reception and includes emergency features like NOAA weather and the 2-meter ham band. It's got all the bells and whistles, clock, alarm, line-in, antenna jacks, memory presets, and it runs on the included power cord or a set of batteries for over 170 hours, making C. Crane reliable no matter where you are. And with the Bluetooth included, you can stream new episodes of mic drop, just like this one, on the CC Radio 3 through any smartphone or smart speaker. To order the CC Radio 3, call C. Crane's US-based customer service at 800-522-8863 or visit ccrane.com/drop. That's ccrane.com/drop and use the code DROP, all caps, all one word, at checkout for 10% off orders over $75. TrueWork is hell-bent on creating one of the most technical, high-performance workwear brands in the world. The TrueWork story begins in the Colorado mountains, where a trade worker knew there had to be a better solution than the wet, heavy gear that was weighing him down. That's where TrueWork was born. TrueWork was kind enough to send me their XL work pant and XL Whoopee vest for free so I could give you my honest opinion, and here it is. TrueWork is the real deal. I've worn other workwear in the past, and there's always something. Other brands that are either not warm enough, they don't fit in the right places, or they take too long to dry after they get wet, but not TrueWork. They're flexible, ridiculously comfortable, warm, easy to clean, and durable too. That's because every TrueWork product is engineered for maximum comfort, protection, and efficiency, with minimum bulk or extra weight. Denim and cotton canvas haven't changed much over the last 200 years. TrueWork upgrades traditional classics by using the same fabrics worn by elite outdoor athletes. Soft, stretchy, sweat-wicking soft-shell work pants are a major upgrade over wet, heavy jeans. Wind and waterproof shells use intelligently placed insulation for streamlined warmth that lets you stay mobile and agile. TrueWork has over 50,000 five-star reviews and countless stories from trade pros in every state and every job across the country. Upgrade to TrueWork for a major change in the way you work. TrueWork helps you be your best when your best matters most. Check out the full lineup and get 15% off your first order at truework.com/micdrop. That's 15% off at TrueWork. That's TrueWork.com/micdrop.
Guys, as you know, I work with a number of different products. One that's easily the most near and dear to my heart from a cause standpoint and a personal relation standpoint is Bubs Naturals. The hat on the coffee table sitting right in front of me belonged to Glenn Doherty. It was a John Deere hat that I gave him. He had it when he tragically passed in Benghazi. And I was fortunate enough to get it back from one of the co-owners of Bubs. He sent it back to me to be able to keep. Bubs Naturals is a tribute to Glenn. He was one of everybody's, he was kind of that guy that was everybody's best friend. I met several people that considered him his best friend, and he was a guy that was impossible not to like, and just, caused happy waves that rippled through every community he was ever a part of. His nickname was Bub, and that's where Bubs Naturals comes from. But it's a lifestyle brand. It's inspired by Glenn. They give a ton to charity. They've donated over $200,000 to charitable causes since their inception in 2018. On Veterans Day, 100% of the proceeds go to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, which does phenomenal work helping active duty and children of lost active duty members go to college or scholarships that they've donated a ton, and they also are heavy into the recreation space of helping people do that, because that's what Bub was all about. They have collagen peptides, which I put into my morning routine every single morning, as well as the functional creamer / MCT oil that goes into it as well. They have hydrate or die electrolyte drink mixes, which are great for pre-workout, during workout, and post-workout to get all the added sodium, potassium, magnesium, etc. that's required when you deplete it. And they now have Bubs Brew, which is a specialty organic coffee that is also very, very good. It's USDA organic, fair trade. It's Whole30 approved, which is the first time that's happened. It's free of yeast, mold, and aflatoxins. Small lot roasted, guaranteed fresh, and it tastes great. Biggest thing is Bubs is a family company. The way that they started is, again, super close to my heart, with him being one of my closest friends for a long time. And I just can't say enough good things about that company, of the product that they put out, why they started, what they give back to veteran communities and the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. And I encourage you to go to bubs.com, and now there's a landing page specifically for Mic Drop listeners. Just enter the code Mike, M-I-K-E, all caps, and you get 20% off your first purchase at bubsnaturals.com. So that's www.bubsnaturals.com/Mike. And you can check out the Mic Drop landing page and go support an amazing cause.
I mean, with the weight of, say, the F-16, if you have a single engine failure, is there any chance at gliding that thing at all, or not really?
It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1,000 feet is going to be a nautical mile. So, we're operating in the 20s. Because any higher than that, it doesn't perform very well, and you can't. You're pretty heavy when you have a combat payload, and you don't want to be any lower because then you increase the risk of getting hit or shot or seen. Now you're spooking the target you're going after. So operating in the 20s, now you're talking, okay, I can glide 15 to 20 miles. You're usually not within 15 to 20 miles of a base. There was Kandahar, there was Bagram, Mosul. There's only a couple bases in Afghanistan. So it's, yes, it's a consideration. Can I glide it and make it somewhere? If not, where am I going to glide to get away from the threat and punch?
So, I mean, in a scenario like that where it's not a catastrophic, being shot down, where the integrity of the platform is still intact, but it's it's an engine failure. Would from the pilot's perspective, would your goal be to try to glide it for a period of time towards somewhere before you punch out, or is it to just get out as quickly as possible?
It depends on the scenario. If I have time to address the situation, okay, what am I seeing? What are my instruments telling me? And do I have the altitude to be able to troubleshoot it and still get the engine restarted, turn it off, turn it back on? Or if my priority is to try to put this down on a runway or a road or something like that, which is almost impossible to do in F-16 because it's like this tiny little tricycle gear. It would rip right off in anything other than a prepared surface. So if you have the altitude to be able to kind of assess the situation and try to troubleshoot, otherwise your priority is, okay, what's my game plan? Go through all right, how am I going to punch and where am I going to go and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like an iPhone, if there's a problem, you turn it off and turn it back on.
You can, yes. Yeah. Shut the engine off.
How long does that take to cycle it?
We're talking seconds. Spooling back up, once you turn it back off, once you turn it off and turn it back on, which thankfully I never had to do in the F-16. That's a bad gig. They do it in the test pilot world just to test the aircraft. I would say maybe 20, 30 seconds to get it going back again.
Probably the longest 20 or 30 seconds
of
your life, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit before we got started, but I'd love to get a little bit of background on you before we dive completely into your career. You're originally from Tennessee.
Yep. I was born in Chattanooga, lived North Georgia, town called Fort Oglethorpe, just south of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Been about 5-6 years there, and then Dad's work got transferred up to New Hampshire seacoast. So I spent most of my childhood up until I graduated college. Went to elementary school, middle school, high school, and college all in the same town.
Oh, wow.
Durham, New Hampshire. There's about 13 miles of coastline on New Hampshire, about an hour north of Boston. And then once I graduated college, 20 years in the military, so we moved all over at that point.
Yeah. During your childhood, did you have siblings? What did your parents do? And were sports a factor growing up?
So we were blue collar, middle to low income. Didn't travel very much because we didn't have the money. My dad worked in the same company for 50 years, janitor all the way up through kind of a manager level company called Combustion Engineering. I had one older brother, a year and a half older. We're kind of polar opposites in personalities, but we get along great. our extended family was pretty close in Tennessee, cousins. But otherwise, once we moved up north, my life was sports. I was a terrible, terrible student, C's and D's through grade school, middle school, high school, even into college. The only reason why I got to college was because of sports.
You're really checking off a lot of the shit you never want to hear a pilot say.
Oh, we haven't even gotten to the motion sickness. I'm
So motion sickness, impatient,
scared of heights.
short attention span, scared of heights, and terrible student and loves sports. This is your captain speaking.
Everyone files off the plane. I was very competitive as a kid, almost obsessively competitive. Had to be first in everything, first in line, and it ended up getting a lot of attention from my teachers, parent-teacher conferences. So they were able to kind of channel that attitude towards sports, and so I played everything. You name it, I played it. Sun up to sundown, I was just roaming, looking for my next contest. Soccer, baseball, picked up golf because I got a job at the golf course early on. Tennis, running was a big deal. Swimming, football, you name it. So,
was there a particular sport that you were the most fond of?
Basketball was probably 80s. So the Celtics, Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, that whole era were big idols of mine back then. So basketball, in fact, once we were state championships in high school, and I realized I wasn't going to make it for grades to get to college. So I'm like, okay, what can I leverage to get me into college? And I was kind of hoping basketball would, but I'm 5'9" tall. I knew I wasn't going to play at the next level. But I was a pretty good runner, so my focus was kind of running. I ended up winning the state championship my junior year in high school, and it was kind of that effort, race, and dedication to the sport that got me recruited to run Division I at cross country and indoor and outdoor track.
Wow, it was cross country what you won in?
Yeah, so I was the lifeguard on Cape Cod down on the seashore. So I had a little bit of swimming background, but my efforts were focused on running.
What year did you graduate high school?
92.
And so were you a lifeguard there after that?
I was a lifeguard locally, and then by the time I got to college, I was brought down to lifeguard on Cape Cod, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Was there a catalyst or kind of a light switch moment for you where going into the Air Force and being a pilot, like, that's what I want to do? And if so, what inspired that?
I would say, growing up in the 80s, the standard original Top Gun was kind of a big inspiration. Everyone wanted to be Maverick. The Right Stuff movie came out in 83, I think it was.
Does American Eagle get an
yes,
honorable mention?
The Walkman on the thigh.
Having a teenage kid fly a fighter jet.
But I had never flown before. It wasn't, there was a serendipitous moment I had freshman year in college. Again, I just got in. I'm struggling with traditional education. And I was walking to class one day, and I came across there was a flyer on the bulletin board to go, hey, come check out the Air Force lifestyle with in the back of a KC-135. The Air Force ROTC program was sponsoring this little event. Back of a KC-135 refueling aircraft at the local Air National Guard unit. And I signed up. I was impulsive. I'd do anything as a kid. So I signed up, never flown in an aircraft before. I went, and I had the most miserable experience of my life. Puked for 2 hours straight. But it was the boom operator, the guy who refuels in the back of the aircraft. He woke me up. I had puke all over me. He woke me up and said, hey, kid, come with me. So he brought me in the back of the aircraft down by the boom, and there's kind of two little benches. He got on his side where he's doing all his pre-refueling checks, and he sits me in the other side. All of a sudden, these F-16s, they pull up to within feet of our window, and we're talking to the fighter pilot down there, and it was like completely forgot about that experience of hurling for 2 hours. I'm like, that's what I want to do. That was kind of a spark that was lit within me. I just had to figure out A, how to graduate, B, how to get to join the military. So next day, I immediately signed up for the RTC program, commit myself, and didn't even tell my parents. No military background. My grandfather served in World War II, Battle of the Bulge, but I didn't know much about it because he died before I was, I think I was like 2 or 3 when he passed away. So I had no exposure other than Top Gun or the Red Stuff. So I signed up for RTC, but I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can even graduate college. I had to figure out how to graduate. And so I came across a program called Outdoor Education. You got your traditional method of education with, you go to class, you sit in a lecture, you take notes, you memorize information, and you regurgitate an exam. It just wasn't my jam. I didn't resonate. I had a real difficult time paying attention. I was more hands-on kind of guy, active and sports and all that. Outdoor education, I went to this class, and it was the first class I went to was how to build a quincy, an igloo in 2-3 feet of snow. And it was hands-on, and it was called winter backpacking. And the idea behind experiential education is you're taught some basic skills, and you immediately go out in the field and practice them. And you learn as you're applying these skills, and then you go back and debrief and talk about it. Well, I'm like, this is awesome. I don't have to sit in class. I can be hands-on. So my classes in college were scuba diving, rock climbing, winter mountaineering, whitewater rafting, Nordic skiing. My instructor was a Navy SEAL for 20 years.
Oh, wow. You remember his name?
Dave, not Dave Scott, Dave Locken.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him.
He was, I can't remember what coast he was on. I think he was East Coast. I can't remember which team he came from, but he spent 20 years. This was back in the 80s and 90s. He was a professor for a long time. But he was kind of my mentor and academic advisor. And so he shepherded me along for 4 years with ROTC and outdoor education. So that was kind of my way to graduate. And then I performed well in ROTC. They got me a pilot slot, and I went off to pilot training after that.
Yeah. Were there any hiccups throughout that process once you got the slot to pilot school and actually going that route? Were there any big roadblocks or speed bumps, or was it pretty smooth sailing?
No, other than challenged academically. ROTC was pretty straightforward. Pilot training was difficult because it was kind of a level up and applying myself. And I had to deal with the motion sickness. And I was competing against, I graduated as a distinguished graduate from ROTC that got me a pilot slot to go right away. Some kids were delayed to go to pilot training months, even a year. I went right away, and that put me in the same class as the top graduates at the Air Force Academy. So these, aeronautical engineering, all these truly, it's one of the best colleges in the country, academically. And so I was like getting my ass handed to me from the day one of pilot training. So I had to figure that out and get over the motion sickness thing.
Did you ever get over motion sickness?
I don't think you fully. I embraced it. I puke and swallow for a year straight.
That's the protocol. It's just...
For me, it was. I had to hide it from my instructors just because.
Would they disqualify you for something?
Oh yeah,
really?
Yeah, one kid in my class got DQ'd, and when you get sick, you just all you want to do is die. It's not a good experience. So to operate an aircraft and not only fly it, you got to employ it. You had to figure it out.
Yeah. Expectation versus reality. Spending years seeing Top Gun and just kind of visualizing what flight training is going to be like. Was there anything that was a huge surprise, or was it about like you thought it would be?
That's a good question. I would say the investment into, let's just say, a mission of the F-16 can stay airborne, depending on how aggressive you're using the throttle, 2.5 hours max. That's pushing it, but more like an hour and a half. if you're carrying external tanks. And the point I'm trying to make is that, like, if you're flying for an hour and a half, the amount of time and effort you're dedicating to preparing for that mission, briefing that mission, and then debriefing and analyzing what you did, it's on a spectrum, because, you know, what I experienced in the very beginning, I thought was, oh my gosh, this is a lot in pilot training. And now fast forward throughout my entire career, and I got to weapons school, the Top Gun school, it's like you're planning for 1 hour flight for 24 hours, 12 hours, whatever, and then you're debriefing for another 12 plus hours. So the amount of resources, time, energy, and effort that's put into actual flying and employing the aircraft is a lot.
It dwarfs the amount of time you're actually flying.
Yeah.
It
Versus you see Top Gun, and it's just like a 5-minute brief, and they're off. It's not reality.
Yeah. That's not a surprise. It reminds me of jumping and diving in the SEAL teams, the same kind of thing, especially parachuting.
Yeah.
You know, it's hours of planning and lead time, and then, you know, a couple minutes of hair on fire, you know, exhilarating adrenaline rush, and then hours of cleanup and debrief and whatever, which was one of the reasons I didn't particularly care for it. But
was it worth it?
I mean, I guess it's kind of relative. I mean, yes, because I wouldn't say it's a big part of the job, but it's a part of the job. And so it is fun. But for me, at least, you know, I was never one of those guys that did it recreationally. Like, you know, some guys get really heavy into it and have thousands of jumps, you know, in the civilian world, and do tandem shit and trick flying and all that kind of stuff. I never did it for fun.
Right.
And so for me, it was just more of it's part of the job. It's cool. After a handful of times, then it's just kind of like, fuck, we got to jump again. Or, you know, diving for me was kind of that same way. But
what percentage of SEALs would be a hobby as well?
That's hard to say. Just thinking, you know, totally off the cuff, 10% maybe. Maybe
do it as a hobby.
Yeah, and it's kind of that way with most aspects of the job. You know, guys that get really into guns too, maybe a little higher percentage there. I wasn't one of those guys either. I mean, I like guns, and I'm into the ballistics aspect of it probably more than the actual platform component. But yeah, whether it's jumping, diving, guns, sniper type stuff, to me they were just all kind of parts of the job, and that was kind of the gist of it. So I'd say, you know, within the community there is a maybe high single percentage to maybe a little over 10 that maybe get really, really heavy into that kind of stuff. I could be horribly wrong. It just it seems like that's about what it is. But
that's interesting, because I think about the fighter community, and I would say about half, it's like a passion hobby.
Yeah.
That either go on, continue to fly, whether it's airlines or, you know, in the civilian world. Yeah, interesting.
I guess in that same frame, then, are the other half guys that are just checking the box? I'll do it for this period of time, and then that's it.
We kind of eat our own. If you don't last very long, if you're not into it, you know, you can either go the fighter route from pilot training on. You can go the fighter route, or you can go the heavies, the C-17s, the C-5s, the C-130s. And people might choose that because they want to do the airlines. They just like that lifestyle. You got to have the right mentality if you want to fight fighters. It's the type A. It's the SEALs, the operators that, you know, want to blow shit up.
Yeah.
And once you even get into that community, you know, some think they want to, but once you get there, it's like it's tough living if it's not for you. And then even within the community, now you have a hierarchical structure of, where do you want to go in your fighter career? Do you want to go be a test pilot? Do you want to go to a fighter weapons school? Do you want to do the Thunderbirds? Do you want to go to the Guard? You know, some of those are lifestyle decisions. But it's, I can't remember the original question.
Well, just, you know, you mentioned half are super passionate, or the other half just kind of checking a box. And
the checking the box part. No, I think those get weeded out, or they'll last a couple of years and then go off and do something completely
Yeah. I mean, because there definitely are, I wouldn't say it's a large percentage. It's, again, a single percentile, but in the SEAL teams, kind of the same thing, especially on the officer side, or I would say there are more officers that ultimately want to run for politics, or, their dad owns a business that they're going to take over, and that feather in the cap of saying, I was a Navy SEAL, promotes or garners attention for whatever it is they want to do next, and kind of validates that pathway. But you mentioned test pilots. Are there a lot of guys that's what they want to do? Is that kind of stuff, or
I would say those are the
weird guys? I would think
those are the smart ones,
really,
and not the outdoor education graduates. Those are the ones that have like aeronautical engineering. They love the
science
behind it. I love the employment of it, the pure stick and rudder, the feel, the G's. That's where I got my rush.
Yeah.
And not to say that they don't experience that, but they want to know the whys behind it, and dig into the charts and the manuals, and it's a big sacrifice because test pilot school is, I believe it's a year, if not longer. And it puts you in this niche of, used to be that was your kind of your own path to be an astronaut. Now it's game over on that. It's a lot different world that we're living in right now. But I knew that wasn't an option. Those were the smart degrees.
It's a little counterintuitive, but I guess it makes sense hearing you explain it. Is the assumption that that's a much higher incidence of problems and accidents and catastrophic failures is in the test pilot program, or is it?
I'd say back in the older generation, that 50s era, the Chuck Yeager, and
where they're trying everything for the first time.
And they're also testing, when a new aircraft comes off the line, and they have the capability to test it and push the envelope. Now there's these big programs to develop the 15, the 16, now the F-22, the F-35, the 6th gen. So it's getting, the funnel's getting narrower and narrower. You don't fly. Test pilot school is the only place where you fly. They hand you a manual. Hey, you're going to fly this aircraft tomorrow, kind of thing.
Oh wow! In
a normal fighter pilot career, you'll be lucky to fly 2 different types of platforms. And I flew the F-16 for 20 years. I didn't.
You mentioned 6th gen. I recently had a young man on that started a company called Mach Industries, which focuses really heavily on weaponized quadcopter drone type technology. And he and I spoke a little bit about the prediction that there will come a point, probably sooner than later, where manned aircraft is essentially obsolete. In warfare, at least. Do you have an opinion on that, or a thought?
My opinion is influenced by a little bit of emotion and desire to always keep the man in the loop. So it definitely remains at an opinion level. I would think that we would always need a human making certain decisions. Now, obviously, the wingman, the drone wingman concept is oil wingman, whatever you want to call it, the terms they're using these days. I think that is highly probable, and it's going to happen. Kind of concept where you got a human in an aircraft and multiple drones that you're controlling, and that's your formation versus 4 humans or 6 humans in a formation. Now, whether you completely take that human out of it, I'm sure inevitable. Going to happen 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
You think it'll be that long?
I don't know.
You hope not.
I hope.
Yeah.
Well, no, I hope it takes forever. I don't know. It's, I guess it boils down to what capabilities we need to have to ensure national security, and that we do have the best.
But I think you could pose the same question for special operators. Could you design unmanned Iron Man suit type or do you even need that? I mean, who's to say you couldn't just have a fleet of 50-pound quadcopters where there's 10,000 of them assaulting a target, and moving through hallways and, or whatever needs to be done. Do you even need a human-shaped thing, entity to go do that? Probably not. Who knows? And similarly, I would say I hope that never comes. I hope there's at least like a guy or a couple of guys. I mean, kind of like with foreign internal defense, where or the programs, especially with special forces, Green Berets, where there's 3 or 4 of them and 50 or 100 local, militiamen or whatever, and they go out together and whatever. Maybe some sort of hybrid like that, where there's a human or a few humans and dozens or hundreds of, whether it's operators or drones or whatever. But
my feed is all those, what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah,
drones. What a shitty way to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and it's especially, I think, terrifying seeing 5K, footage of, a drone flying and dropping a grenade on a foxhole or something, and the guy's, trying to bail out and not doing. I mean, and it's just, there's so many examples of that happening, and I think that's one of the things that we talked about is kind of the real world feedback of a basically from a technology and warfighting capability, a first world country battling another first world country utilizing these technologies. And as bad as it is, it's a great test ground for countries like us and unfortunately China to gain a lot of insight and real world feedback as to the efficacy of them, and then what needs to be changed or augmented or whatever. But well, I guess that one of the things that we talked about also, this has been a few months or maybe even longer than that now, but I think it was maybe the Secretary of the Air Force or some individual in a similarly high-end leadership capacity that flew with a drone or an AI piloted airframe.
SecAF.
Okay, yeah, and basically they came to the conclusion that that human beings were getting outclassed every single time by the AI operated one.
Yeah.
What do you have an opinion on that?
No, I read that same article. I was following along. He got in the back seat, drone capable, with a pilot in the front, with no pilot in the front.
I wouldn't want to even do that, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, that would be dicey.
Well, look at what's going on in Austin with the Teslas.
Oh, I know.
Buddy sent me a video. He's in the back seat. He's just filming. There's nobody in the front seat. He's in an Uber Tesla and it's driving him around.
10 out of 10, I'm not getting in an unmanned Uber.
Ever? You don't think you ever will?
I mean, I would be foolish to sit here and say ever, but as I sit here right now, absolutely not. Absolutely wouldn't do it. I'd rather drive myself. I mean, I take Ubers.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so first duty station wise, where was that and what did it consist of?
So the training takes roughly about 2 years to get through pilot training and all the additional top-off type combat survival, Siri, centrifuge, chamber. And so you're hopping all around. You go from pilot training to learn how to fly the F-16 for 6 months. That's one location. By the time you get to your first operational assignment, for me, it was Korea, Osan Air Base in South Korea. That was 98. It was a remote location, kind of the last, hair on fire type fighter pilot. Most of us were there alone, not with families. You can bring families as a command sponsored is what the term is, and you can stay for 2 years. But this was like a 1 year, and then I was going to Italy after that. But Korea was you're more or less flying along the DMZ. You're planning for the invasion, north coming south. So you're going against these hardened bunkers and all these teenage MiGs, and it's just kind of this. The scenario is just overwhelming force coming south. So that was my first true exposure to combat mentality operator.
Were there any balloons going up or close calls, any spin ups in that on that or in that duty station?
No, that was pretty stable the year I was there. I don't remember any incursions. Not that they were flying much at all.
What year span was that?
That was 98 to 99.
Okay.
But it was just a lot of intense training, a lot of night flying, MVGs, chem training, concern about chemical warfare type stuff, but there's no engagements going on. I'd say my highlight was actually just a training exercise with the SEALs. Actually, I was the young lieutenant, so I was voluntold, "Hey, you're going to go do this training exercise." And,
Like a CSAR kind of thing?
yeah, but it was like this multi-day. All they told me was grab this gear, which was just a flight suit, jacket, and go to these coordinates. And I sat there for hours, and then all of a sudden, the 5 or 6 dudes in ghillie suits were within feet of me, and I had no clue. In the middle of the night, and then they take me, and then it's just this trek through the woods, and then get on these different ATV type vehicles. They take me to the beachhead. They stick me on a Zodiac, take me out to a Mark V, up the ramp, out to a submarine. It was a really cool just to watch what was going on.
Yeah, that's neat.
It was funny because this girl that I was in ROTC with, her name was Heather Brown. By the time it's like day 3 of this whole training exercise, I'm a little oblivious. I just haven't slept. I'm hungry, dehydrated. And the SEAL on the Zodiac with me start shooting the shit with him, and he tells me his name, and he says, "Oh yeah, I got a sister in New Hampshire." I'm like, it's made the connection. It was the brother of this girl with the ROTC.
Yeah, that's why it wasn't Adam Brown, was it?
No. Give me a second. Last name was Brown.
Yeah. I am curious. You mentioned you went through SEER school, but while you were on active duty and throughout your entire career, did your survival kit that you always had with you in case of being shot down, was there anything unique about it, or did it change at all over the course of your career? What you put in it? No,
it's pretty standard. It's a seat kit. There's not much you're carrying on your person because it's not going to survive an ejection. It's not going to, you have your 9mm in your survival vest. Hopefully that in your PRC, your radio. There's an additional radio in the kit, but most of it's in the kit underneath the seat, and it's on a lanyard when you do eject. Your survival raft, which is a 1-person. There's just not much there because the cockpit's pretty small. But it's your basic kind of kit. There was nothing fancy about it. Guys were, when ISIS was kicking off, we were like, okay, if you back to the single seat mentality, and the training that you go through in the, SEER school is like, play along, try to, survive as long as possible. Well, whole ISIS, we're watching film of people, in cages getting drowned, burned. We're like, I'm fighting to the death if I ever got caught. So people were adding, things to their kits, and they were strapping machetes to their leg and adding more clips and
Rambo shit.
Yeah. Good luck with that, but it was. But it didn't change much. It was.
Fast forward to 9/11. Where were you at, and how did that impact your career?
So I my first assignment was Korea, and then I went to Italy, and that was just after Kosovo. In fact, our commander, General Goldfein, who became the chief of staff of the Air Force, he had just gotten shot down in Kosovo. So it was kind of hot and heavy there. I got there at the tail end of that engagement. And then I was there for 2 years. That was winding down, and then 9/11 happened. So I was in Italy, locked down. We didn't know what was going to be asked of us and what type of response. So we were ginning up different types of plans, different deployments. And then I got selected to go to fighter weapons school or Air Force weapons school, which is the Top Gun school in Las Vegas. So now I'm out of the combat rotation and go to training in 2000. That was 2003. So we were just kind of on high alert. We didn't deploy. Actually, we did, but it was Southern Watch, Northern Watch mentality still. And then once 2003, when we all the operations in the Middle East started to heat up, I was at fighter weapons school, and I was a FAC, forward air controller, qualified F-16 pilot at that point. So they were going to take us out of this program to put us those first few nights, anticipating a lot of CAS and FAC requirements, but it never came to fruition. I just stayed in the program. And
Was there any part of you in that window that felt like you were missing out? I guess just based on, the last engagement in the Middle East, the first Gulf War, which lasted a month. And, was there part of you that felt like you were missing the boat being at a training command while shit was kicking off?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's just, whether it's right or wrong, it's the mentality within the culture. It's what you train for. Probably a similar mentality with the SEALs. It's like, this is what we do day in and day out, train and prepare. And I was enhancing my skill sets by going to weapons school, hoping someday you would have the opportunity to actually, use them for real. And, when it came game time.
At what point did you end up finally going to a combat sortie type of command where you were actually engaging enemy targets?
So you depends on how you define combat. Some, like, even those were combat missions in Korea, which weren't really combat missions. And Northern Southern Watch, you're doing patrols, and you're employing every once in a while when a AAA piece would kind of pop up south or north of the latitude that it wasn't supposed to be. And it was now a threat to us doing these patrol missions. So there was like these bits and pieces throughout, and it wasn't until Afghanistan there I employed a lot on a 6-month rotation out of Bagram.
What year?
2015.
Okay. So between 03 and 2015, can you walk us through your career?
Yeah. So I, from weapons school, I was sent to teach F-16s training at Luke Air Force Base. So I did a couple of years there as the weapons officer. And then I moved to Las Vegas to do operational test. So there's developmental tests, the test pilots, Edwards, Chuck Yeager, and then there's operational testing, where we were testing new weapon systems, new software upgrades, developing new tactics. A unit called the 422 Test and Evaluation Squadron. That was out of Las Vegas, so I did that for a couple of years, and then I was selected to be part of the Air Force Thunderbirds to do demonstrations. And I did that for a couple of years, and then it was time to do my non-flying job, so I went off to do command at the Air Force Academy for a couple of years. And then that got shortened because I got selected to go command the aggressor squadron in Las Vegas. And then did that for a couple of years. And then I went off to Italy to do Afghanistan missions.
During that window between 03 and 2015, one of the questions I have as a note is, what is red flag and how is it used to train pilots?
So following the Vietnam War, they decided we need to come up with this, concept of mass employment. So I believe it was early 70s is when they started it. It's out of Las Vegas. They have a great training range to the north. Area 51's right in the middle. And then you kind of fight all around Area 51. And they do like anywhere from 5 to 6 of these big mass employments each year, and it's almost like a preparatory training leading up to deployment to a hot zone or wherever you're going to combat deployment. So they'd come to Vegas for 4 to 6 weeks. Red flag would be about a 4-week. It could be a 2-week to a 4-week window where you're employing a day and a night mission, and that's your purpose. And it's like this building block approach where you'll start off with a basic scenario and a basic threat, and it will progress and build throughout the week, so you get the massive engagement at the end. Different types of scenarios. It could be CAS focus, where there's no air threat, but it's heavy on the ground, or you could be some type of defense, counter air, DCA, where we're protecting the homeland, and the aggressors are just sending mass iron in the sky to try to attack the homeland.
The Red Dawn scenario.
Yeah. Or you could have an offensive counter air. We're going to go do interdiction missions deep into enemy territory to take out their nuke plants. So now you got to fight your way in, drop your bombs, and fight your way out kind of scenarios. So that's the idea behind Red Flag. And there's a dedicated aggressor squadron that I was a part of, the 64th Aggressors. There's one in Alaska. Otherwise, it's organically generated. So if I'm stationed in Italy, I'm going to take my F-16 and help my guys train, and then I'll swap roles the next day. But it's not really a good use of resources because I'm dumbing down. I'm not applying my skill sets the way I should. That's where, you might bring it up. It's commercially provided adversary. So I was involved in a company called Draken International, where it was a commercially generated resource providing adversary support at, a lot less expensive than operating a F-16 or an F-22. Yeah. That's the idea behind Red Flag, and it's great training. In a similar fashion, the weapons school is located there as well. And they got a similar process where they do this mass employment, where it's big exercises, graduation exercises, where it's the entire Air Force's fleet is involved. You got B-2s, B-1s, B-52s, and then you got all the fighters doing their roles, and helicopters and tankers.
So it sounds like a coordinated, anything possible, anything goes type of training exercise that really kind of keeps you on your toes for being ready for any of your capabilities. Is that a fair assessment?
And it usually is concurrent with, okay, these units are going to deploy together to fulfill their aircraft's purpose, whether it's air to ground, CAS. They're going to do these Red Flag exercises together, and then they'll deploy together. Yeah. So there's some consistencies. You build relationships, and you work together to figure out game plans. And the scenarios are kind of based on, okay, what's going on in the AO right now, and you can kind of tailor the scenarios. Usually they're on steroids, though. Scenarios that we certain risk levels we wouldn't take in the real world in the AO, but training at that higher levels are going to provide us some experiences that we otherwise would not get.
Within, whether it was any of the Red Flag exercises or any of the other training scenarios that you've been in, did you have any really close calls, crashing wise, or having to bail out or anything like that?
Not. Thankfully, I never had any huge emergencies. Just stuff that I had to early return and divert into a different airport, or airfield. MVGs, sometimes you get a little close when your situational awareness goes down, and because the deconfliction is really the contract that keeps you safe in a training environment. Combat, it gives a shit about your altitude. But in a training environment, you got to build in deconfliction, whether that's vertical altitude deconfliction or timing. You know, you got to be on timeline, or it's lateral. You know, this is my area, this is your area, and you got to maintain those contracts. And the only way to do that is to maintain high situational awareness. When you start to lose that, and sometimes you don't realize you're losing it, now you're not adhering to your contracts, and that's where these situations can get hairy, especially at night, MVGs, and you know, you're spending a lot of time looking down in the cockpit, looking at your 4x4 inch screens, your radar, your targeting pod, your situational display, all these different sensors, and you're not just looking outside.
Forgive my ignorance. It probably comes off as an ignorant or dumb question, but NVGs in a fighter jet to me seems less important than it would, say, you know, as a helo pilot where you're doing inserts and extracts and things like that. Like, I guess what is the reasoning or the purpose behind having them?
Certainly doesn't turn night into day, but flying formations.
Oh,
because you got covert lighting, you just flip a switch. It's versus the overt. You know, you can see without them, just this very distinct blink. But you know, you don't want the enemy to see those lights, so you're going to fly with covert lighting, and you can't see those without the NVG. So maintaining formations.
So solo, you wouldn't.
No, so if I'm doing an air to ground mission, I can make out, you know, with the cultural lighting or with enough illumination from the moon, I should be able to see some things using my NVGs looking down, whereas, you know, without them I couldn't see. So now I'm trying to make sense of, you know, if good guys with strobes, aerostrobes, I can pick them up with my NVGs. Otherwise, I'm blind as a bat without them. Reforming on a tanker at night, you'll need them. So they definitely enhance, and you know, it's usually the 2-barrel. We test it out in the 422, the wide panoramic ones, but those are super heavy. But it's, you know, it's enhances your situational awareness for sure.
You mentioned Area 51 a few minutes ago. Have you spent much time there? One of those no comment type answers. I mean, is it? I guess that secretive to where like there's a lot of things you can't mention about it.
They just do a lot of testing up there. Even, you know, it's all special access programs. I mean,
is it as cool as it's made out to be? I've never been there.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there anything different about it that you can mention in terms of the way that it's laid out, or like, are there any things on there that you wouldn't see anywhere else base wise?
I mean,
Would you tell me if there were?
You know, it's not much different from any other airfield. There's just a lot of hangars. It's a very, very long runway. I mean, you fly right up close to it, even if you're not authorized, because it's cordoned off. You know, in fact, if you're flying one of these red flag missions and you're not authorized to go inside the airspace that protects Area 51, you're sent home. Like, you could be from, you know, stationed in Italy. You fly all the way to Vegas to do this pre-deployment. If you skirt it by a quarter of a mile, dude, you're going home.
Really?
They're pretty strict about it.
I mean, and is that like a career-ending mistake?
No, it's just
Feel like a dumbass.
you feel like a dumbass. Now you let your team down, and
Yeah.
now you're not getting the training that you're supposed to.
If you didn't know that it had the reputation that it had, does the sense of security and classifiedness of it exude to a degree with which it's very obvious that there's something different about it?
I'd say so. I mean, I don't even know half, 3/4. I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
So there's a
I
lot
know what
going
I
on
was
there.
involved with, and
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad we have it. I'm glad we, you know, I hope they're doing good work there.
From a reactionary standpoint, whether it's obviously, I mean, you mentioned the repercussions if you're in an aircraft. If it's a an unidentified aircraft, and I don't mean UFO wise, just a normal traditional airframe that isn't supposed to be there, that hasn't identified itself, whatever, and gets skirts or even breaks the airspace there. Is there a lot more countermeasures that you're aware of on that base that would neutralize something like that than say Nellis?
They know if you stick a wingtip inside there, I can't remember, it's like 20 miles maybe around. They know if you dip a wingtip inside there.
It's a lot more sensitive.
I think they're pretty sensitive to.
I guess since we're on the topic, do you believe in aliens?
Do I believe in aliens? Man, you're open up a can of worms here with however I answer this. I have no additional knowledge of that anyone else doesn't have. I do believe there's got to be something out there. I don't know what.
I guess to clarify or be more specific, do you think that we have encountered them at all? Like, because I agree, like just mathematically, there has to be other intelligent life form of some degree, in other parts of our universe. But I guess from the amount of time you've spent in the Air Force and even with the SpaceX stuff, do you have? And I know even if you had evidence, you wouldn't mention it, but without that, like, do you think that there has been encounters or engagements or any visitation of our planet by some sort of extraterrestrial life form?
I don't think so. I mean, I could be ignorant. I don't know. I don't think so.
Can you just lie and say yes, absolutely?
We want clicks.
I mean, like, there's so much stuff out there, whether it's Joe Rogan podcasts or just, I will say, I mean, there's been a lot of footage released in the last few years from military aircraft that are pretty dicey and hard to explain. I had an F-18 pilot on here maybe a year or two ago that was pretty convinced that they had encountered things that they at least couldn't explain and didn't make any sense, and he wouldn't go as far as to say that yes, for sure, that's some sort of life form from somewhere else. But the things that they were witnessing on some of their either TARPS pods or whatever type of imagery systems they're employing, they're just like, can't really explain what we're seeing. Have you encountered any of that, and do you have any position on that? I guess with some of the things that you've seen.
No, I mean, there's definitely plenty of stories out there that could allude to the validity of something. Just weeding out what's someone just trying to get recognition and versus what is reality. I have not encountered anything in my flying career, nor did I experience anything in the capsule, much as I wanted to.
Yeah,
tentacles reaching over the.
Well, it's always weird too, right? It's never anything that's not like visually so striking that that you're caught off guard by it, but. Did you know anybody that experienced anything that was at least enough to make them question, like, I don't know what it was that we were looking at?
No, I don't think I feel like I would have remembered these conversations. I mean, other than what I've read and talked to from some of the Navy guys, what they've experienced.
Or maybe they men in blacked you and
it's true.
Made you forget the conversation. You never know. So there were some Navy guys that you talked to that ran into some squirrely shit?
Just what you've seen on the internet and watched their documentaries and podcasts and just those guys.
Well, Navy guys are full of shit historically. So
you said it. I didn't say it.
I'm living it. I'm a subject matter expert on it.
We're just as full of shit.
Yeah, that's reassuring. All military guys are full of it.
10% truth, right?
Yeah. One of the rumors that I read in doing some of the research for this episode was that Saddam Hussein offered a reward for shooting down coalition aircraft. Were you aware of any of that?
I'm not sure. I'm not aware.
I guess going forward to that 2015 kind of, full speed ahead or super legit combat sortie type of flying that you did. Can you walk us through that deployment and kind of, even before you went, what was communicated to you as to where you were going, what the objective was, and kind of how that deployment panned out?
Yeah, so that was my last assignment before the end of my 20-year career. We were deploying to Bagram. I was assigned at the higher level, in the wing level, but I was deploying with the Triple Nickel, the 555th Fighter Squadron. Very famous squadron from back in the Robin Olds days of flying P-51s in World War II and the F-Force in the Vietnam War. Legend among legends in the fighter community. So I deployed with the Triple Nickel to Bagram, and it was counterinsurgency. We were just hunting and pecking terrorists, and it was a lot of the. It was cyclical as far as the employment was for that mission. I can't remember who we swapped out with, but I was flying every 2 to 3 days. Otherwise, I was doing leadership at the wing level at Bagram. Our missions were F-16s. We were carrying GB-38s and 54s, as well as a Maverick. So 500-pound guided via coordinates or laser, and the Maverick tank buster rocket type 200-300-pound warhead. I can't remember exactly how big it is. Did the work on a tank or vehicle moving. And as far as flying 2 to 3 times, or every 2 to 3 days, I would fly. There were 4-hour missions, and we would be given more or less a grid to go hang out in. And you kind of knew based on intel, because how it would work is they'd find some terrorist asshole to identify, and they'd work their way up the chain to find a high-value target worthy of employing against. And we worked a lot with the SEALs, with other agencies. Predators would be 24-hour surveillance. They would get eyes on and pattern of life. They'd figure out. And then eventually it would come to a point of, okay, we're going to employ against this guy. And they'd go through, the 9 line, the 15 line, depending on what was required. And then you'd employ. Sometimes most of my engagements were against vehicles, because by that point it's going to mitigate collateral damage risks, because they're in a vehicle out in the middle of the desert versus in a village. And these weapons are very accurate. And it was, I would say 69% of the time I was employing over the 6-month period.
I'm assuming you remember the very first mission that you dropped live ordnance on a target in combat. Do you remember the specifics of it?
For that, it was many years prior with my first engagement, but for this deployment,
Can you share that story? And then
it was just a AAA piece in South Iraq, GB-12 night employment. It was pretty vanilla, cut and dry. They were just, you could see the tracers at night, and it was kind of bugging us for a couple days on end, and we ended up taking it out. The first employment in Bagram was against a vehicle. I talked about one. Let me talk about another one. There was a town up, can't remember the name of the town. It was up by the Tajikistan border. But there was friendly forces that were pinned down. They were in the middle of the village, and they were getting shot at, and we were responding. So it was an alert launch. We were getting up there as fast as possible, and it's just very hectic. It's nice when you're drone into your grid to be able to get organized, because you got all this shit in the cockpit. You got mission materials and imagery and lineup cards, and then you got all the sensors you got to set up, the targeting pod, the radar, set up all your weapons, and you got your NVG set up for the nighttime if you're going to transition from day into night. So when you're rushed, it's just that much more stressful. And you have your wingman, two ship is when you is how you employ, and you go up. We went up to the village, and you could see it was hot. There was smoke plumes everywhere, and we kind of quickly identified where the friendly forces were. It was just a matter of, okay, where are the bad guys at? And they were shooting RPGs from the top of a more or less a 2-story building in the middle of this town, and they were running to and from 2 different locations. So typically how we were employing was a progressive approach. It would be, again, to mitigate risk of collateral damage, especially in the middle of a village. So we'd start off with show of force, AB, low as we can get, just kind of spook them and draw fire away from the friendlies and towards us, because it's pretty difficult to shoot an F-16 going 400 or 500 miles an hour.
How low are you guys when you're doing that low?
You don't want to get too low. Hang up high, and part of that is just you don't want to burn the target because you'll spook them if they can hear you. But if that's the intent, show of force to make noise, afterburner, low altitude, it's 500 feet maybe. It's just a quick buzz because you once you can get eyes on, you can kind of see what's happening. And they were running from point A to point B up and down this street. And it's progressive. So you do show force, they continue to engage the friendlies. Now it's like, okay, we're going to strafe. 20 millimeter, it's not much, 5 seconds of gun. It's more of a suppression. It's not for true lethality. It's fun. Love shooting the gun. It's not quite like the A10, the 30 mil chainsaw. But it's more of a suppression to again, draw fire away and get them to stop shooting. So we do a couple passes, get rid of all our gun passes. And now it's time, okay, it's not working. Now it's time to employ the GBU-38 and the 54s. And these are 500-pound. We take out the buildings. And that suppressed, that took care of the threat. And then on the way home, we're like, okay, all we have left are Mavericks. And those are used against vehicles, tanks, whatever. We thought we were going home after 4 hours of doing this. And on the way home, they diverted us to a tanker because they're going to reassign us way up by the northeast corner, almost towards China, up in the southwestern portion of the Himalayas. The high peaks. It's getting night, MVGs now, and high peaks at night is not fun because it can be pretty scary. So they direct us up there, and they said, hey, there's a vehicle with a turret modified, looks like a tank, but it's a vehicle with a turret on top is wreaking havoc into this village, and they're just firing just rounds after round. And so we go up there, all we have are these Mavericks, and we don't have. Typically, you got predators on board, you got, humans, you got good ways to positively identify the threat. Well, up there, it's just us. So once we get up there and circle the wagons and try to figure out what's going on, they start firing at us. They point this turret, and I can see it in my targeting pod. You see this turret starts pointing, and you see these tracers, and we tell them, hey, we're getting shot at. And they're like, all right, that's self-defense, take out, because they have enough intel of what they're causing, the havoc they're causing in this village. And there's several guys around this, and we could even see them with these, KS-19s, just Rambo style, holding them, shooting up in our general direction. And so we set up for a 2-ship employment using the Mavericks against this vehicle.
What is the explosive weight of a Maverick?
It's either 200 or 300 pound warhead on these, and it's you can either self-guide them. It's a pretty challenging employment. It's not impossible, but it's more or less put the thing on the thing in the targeting pod in the Maverick video, and you're lasing as you employ. And it's the flight time is, I don't know, like 15 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. It's pretty quick. Or you got buddy lays options where you'll stick your wingman up in an arc up in the 20s, and as long as you correlate and you set the right PRF on the laser code, he will designate the target. You just need to launch that and recover and get back into your formation, and he'll laze the target. And that's how we employed on this one. Was he was going to shoot his Maverick for the first pass, and I was lasing, and my wingman, thankfully, once we employed, it's like they're firing at your own direction, but I am heads down in the cockpit doing my thing because we want to make sure we neutralize this threat. But he's directing, he's providing mutual support, and he's directing my formation and my reaction to these rounds that are headed in my direction. So it was a hairy night. We ended up employing against that threat. Then we went home after that.
Is there a range of altitude that you're dropping ordnance from, or does it vary significantly? Is there like an average or a normal average that you're typically dropping it from?
There are, for desired weapons effects, there are certain parameters you want to strive for. But you can employ these munitions in different ways, whether it's a dive, whether it's a level pass. And it also depends on the settings you put into the munition itself. So it's kind of like there's a whole spectrum of capabilities, but there is a certain envelope you got to put the aircraft in to be able to employ.
That's all capability based, basically. If you're using this for this, then it's going to be in this range, vice versa.
It's same with, like, you could use those 500 pounds against a slow mover. If it's fast, you really want the Maverick because that sucker's guiding. It's being propelled, so versus a free fall. It's just, it's using the kinetic energy, the potential energy that it's got. It's got fins and it's making adjustments, but those are finite versus a Maverick. It can guide specific.
So of all of the things that an F-16 can carry armament-wise, you've got guns, you've got Mavericks, you've got the tank busters that are 200-300 pounds. Are there any other outside the box or abnormal payload components?
You can pretty much carry anything in the inventory. Depends on the role that you have for that F-16, whether it's you're doing CAS or whether you're doing interdiction, and now you want like a GB-24, a 2,000 pounder to go inside of a bunker. But in a CAS scenario, you're not carrying those big bombs. You're carrying small 250 to 500 with something where you can employ against vehicles as well. And it's constantly changing. I mean, I've been out for 10 years now. I'm sure have new types of weapons and guidance systems that enhance it. And some are like tungsten steel. That's the blast frag that's going to take out something, or it could be carbon fiber blast that's going to take out the threat.
Really? So like it's carbon fiber shrapnel?
Mm-hmm.
Really? What does
it's
that?
The blast mechanism that actually
What
eliminates the threat.
Advantage would carbon fiber have over something
It's
more traditional like steel or?
My bros are gonna torch me on this, trying to explain this, but I think it has to do with like the again, mitigating the risk of collateral damage.
It's almost like frangible rounds for operators.
So now you can be a little more finite with a carbon fiber where the blast frag is going to be so focal versus tungsten steel. It's sending out lugs and chunks everywhere.
Right. Obviously, it's going to depend somewhat on configuration, but is there a maximum payload poundage-wise that an F-16 can or typically would carry?
Yes. I don't know what the number is, but going to depend on what the loadout is. You're not going to carry more than 2,000 pound, like a GB-24. We even carry those anymore. Otherwise, it's going to be a 4x on the 500 pound, or you might have a Maverick on one side and 2 500 pounds on the other. SDBs are now a player, the small diameter bombs, 250 pound.
So it sounds like maybe upwards of 5,000 pounds of payload you could probably carry.
Let's call it that, and I'm sure someone will
will
call that and go,
"You fucking
kid,
moron.
You suck."
Yeah, but you'll get that either way, probably. No,
Yeah, that's true.
I'm being on shows long enough.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. Somebody's going to tell you.
Give me your weapons school patch back.
The 2,000. So you can carry 2,000 pound. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming those are center mounted.
They're on the stations 3 and 5.
Really?
Yeah, there's 9 stations. And
so is it like, do you ride motorcycles at all?
I did when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. So like if you've got a pushing 3 bills chick on the back and she gets off, like is it that drastic if you've got 2,000 pounders and you drop one and now you have one where you've got to really compensate?
You can feel a little bit, but there's so much thrust in that engine.
Really? But maneuverability wise, it's not.
You got to trim it up.
Yeah.
So you'll feel it because it's more of the, I'm going to say the weight. I would think it's more the aerodynamics of something hanging because it's a fairly big profile. So you can feel a little bit of yaw when you only release one, and now you have one and the other, and you're asymmetric.
Yeah.
And you can feel that, but it's nothing. You don't want to go do some dog fighting or anything like that with munitions hanging. Yeah. You wouldn't want to anyways in the first place. But.
Yeah. I guess so. If you're fully loaded out, full of fuel, full payload, flying around and trying to maneuver versus your Winchester and on fumes, like, is it a huge difference between those two in terms of how it feels to fly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once you release all this weight,
now you
gone.
feel like you're in a go-kart flying.
Yeah. You still have external tanks, which is a lot different from a clean F-16, but you have no gas. It's a trade-off.
Do you know about how much gas you can carry maximum?
Oh my God!
How is it measured? It's measured in pounds, right?
Yeah, 7,200 clean. 3, 11 plus is what I remember.
11,000.
Let's call it 11,000 plus.
What does the F-16 dry weigh?
It's really testing me, man.
I'm not trying to, I'm just curious. I mean, because
it depends on the type and obviously the loadout and the block type of F-16. But let's call it 25,000.
I didn't realize they were that heavy, and I assume they're considerably lighter than an F-14 or an F-18.
Mm-hmm.
A dual engine versus.
Yeah, but they got more thrust. Yeah. So it's the 18 and the 16 are pretty comparable.
Yeah.
14 is a little bit bigger platform and was on a skill level too, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. 22 and 35 heavier still.
Oof. They have more thrust. F-22 for sure. I don't know about the F-16, F-35 comparable. I'll look that up.
Yeah. I'm into cars and bikes, and it's fascinating to me, like the wiggle room that you have in fighter jets that way with weight, because especially in motorcycles, but even in cars, a really light supercar is like right around 3,000 pounds,
Okay.
And to me, it reminds me like the old school F-16s, F-18s versus the 22s and 35s. It's kind of like the internal combustion engine only versus the hybrids. The hybrids are a lot heavier because they have electric motors infused either into the main engine and or powering either both front wheels or all four or whatever, and it adds a lot of weight. And so a lot of these hybrid cars are 36, 38, 4,000 or even 4,200 pounds, which you talk about thrust compared to say horsepower and torque in a car. Like a couple 100 pounds can make an enormous difference. The way it drives, the way it handles, straight line speed, track speed, everything, and motorcycles even more so. You take two motorcycles that are the exact same, we'll call it a leader race bike or track bike, that the bike weighs, let's say 430, 450, something like that. and you have a 200-pound rider and a 160-pound rider, like that 160-pound guy is going to absolutely clown the 200-pound guy on a track or even in straight line speed if they're relatively similar riding competency or skill level. Whereas here you're talking about thousands of pounds not making much of a difference. To me is hard to imagine because, you know, in cars and bikes, ounces make a difference. You know, you can tell a difference if you're doing performance data, say on a full tank of gas versus a quarter tank of gas, you know, like a 60 to 130 time or a quarter mile time. Like you can see a difference in measurable speed data based on having a passenger or not, you know, so little amounts of weights can make a huge difference.
I guess, does it boil down to what's the intent? Like I would assume on a track, it's top speed and acceleration?
No, I mean, I would say track, it's absolutely about handling and suspension stiffness and lack of body roll, downforce, and plantedness. So, you know, not to nerd out for you guys, but
you just did, dude.
We're digging into it. So, you know, fast forward a few minutes if you don't like it. But, so like a Porsche GT3 RS, it's non-forced induction, you know, so there's no turbo, no supercharger. It's an inline six. It's making right at 500 horsepower. But the dual wishbone suspension up front and how planted and the amount of downforce from the spoiler and all the other aero components kind of mixed into the vehicle make that car will kick the shit out of 700 or 800 horsepower cars that don't have as tight of a suspension or you know, lack of body roll and et cetera. So where overall horsepower and top line or top speed matter are on longer tracks, you know, that the shorter and more technical the track, the less horsepower is going to make much of a difference. It's going to be about tires. You know, the tires can make a huge difference if you're using an R compound tire versus a street all-terrain, or not all-terrain, but all-season, or even a summer tire. It can be seconds of difference on a short track. On longer tracks like the Nürburgring, which has long straightaways, it's a 12-mile track basically. That's where horsepower is going to make more of a difference. And downforce is a double-edged sword too, because obviously the more planted you are, the tighter you can take corners, but the more it's going to slow you down on the straightaways because it's squatting the car down, and the less horsepower you're going to actually be able to use. So you're kind of like, if you think of it almost like a stereo equalizer. You know, you got treble, bass, you know, volume, master, gain, et cetera. You know, you're kind of doing that same thing with track cars or race cars, where you've got, you know, horsepower, torque, but you've got downforce, you've got, you know, handling, suspension, stiffness, et cetera. And so all of those things matter. But really, you know, where huge horsepower and, you know, top line speed really only matters for drag racing, or like, you know, if you're on an airstrip, you know, doing a top end run or, you know, something like that, where being able to throw the car around doesn't matter. But again, like driving a 3,000-pound car versus a 3,600-pound car, like if you're even a reasonably experienced track driver, you'll notice a huge difference in how the car handles on a track on tight technical turns and stuff like that. And same with a motorcycle. You know, motorcycles have downforce, they have tighter suspensions, or, you know, whether they're analog suspensions or electronic suspensions that are making micro adjustments on the fly or whatever. And weight, same thing. You'll notice a big difference, 20 or 30 pounds on a motorcycle. You can feel when you're moving it around and stuff. But anyway, sorry to bore all the people that don't give a shit about any of that stuff. But again, hearing you talk about, you know, how little of a difference thousands of pounds can make because of the adjustment that you have with that much thrust and being able to still move the airframe around is pretty fascinating.
I guess what we're judging and evaluating ourselves on is like how well we finesse the aircraft and fly it in a dogfight type. And that's typically done in a clean configuration, everything's stripped down. You don't want anything on the aircraft because you're truly finessing the aircraft in dogfighting. Otherwise, when we talk about those loadouts, you know, the threat is so far away, or there is no threat. So it's more of like figuring out how to employ, and the focus is the sensors, and, you know, we're not dissecting the the knots in whether a store is hanging or not.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pilot competency wise, obviously there are guys who are better than others, but once you get to a level where you're flying combat sorties for the U.S. military, irrespective of branch, would you say that most guys are fairly similarly compared in competency, or are there guys who are just light years better than other guys?
I would say there's discrepancies, or there's differences in capability, and part of it is there is the natural talent, just pure good hand-eye coordination, but that's only a piece of it. The other piece is just their experience level, what they've seen, what they've been through, as well as the training, because not all fighter pilots are treated the same. You go through different types of programs, and even just your vanilla fighter pilot, you're going to start off as a wingman. You're going to be a wingman for a couple of years. Then you'll be a flight lead, where you're now leading 2 aircraft. And then you'll do that for a while before you get bumped up to lead 4 aircraft, 4-ship flight lead. And then from there, you'll bump up and become an instructor. Now you can teach the wingman how to be a 2-ship, 4-ship. And then once you get to instructor, now that's kind of like the top level. But even the top instructors now will go off and be selected to go to fighter weapons school or Air Force weapons school, which is Top Gun. And that's a 6-month program, your PhD in all things tactics. Not only your platform, but you learn everything else about whatever else is in the inventory, Air Force inventory. And live and breathe it for 6 months. That's, 24/7. That's what you're doing. It's a pretty intense program. And then now you're a weapons officer, which is you are the chief instructor for any unit. It's like probably SEAL Team 6 for us.
I got you.
It's the top tier for fighter pilots. So there's the element of talent, experience, and then training opportunities that kind of differentiate between capabilities.
Obviously, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but like let's say you look at like NASCAR or F1 or like the MotoGP type, sport bike racing. Sometimes you'll get these 19, 20, late teens, early 20s kids that are like these prodigies that come in and they're beating guys that are 20 years older than them with loads of experience. And I know you can't really have a civilian counterpart to fighter jet fighting, but do you ever see that where a 24, 25, 26-year-old kid is just unbelievably good at things that he almost shouldn't be because he's just naturally gifted at it? Do you see that?
Yeah, there are definitely throughout my career, you would see some young kid. And it's not like you're going to get them when they're 18, 19,
Right.
20-year-old. You still got to graduate college and then go through pilot training. And there's no way to accelerate that more than like getting to the 23, 24-year point. And that young lieutenant shows up in a fighter squadron and he's just naturally talented. He's got a high situational awareness. He's very talented, hand-eye coordination, cerebral is off the charts, and he definitely progresses. How you'll see that is they'll get bumped up to flight lead and instructor quicker than everyone else. And then once they get to that point, you have to be an instructor to be able to get nominated and selected to go to fighter weapons school. And then they'll go to weapons school, and they might be ahead of their peers in weapons school, and that just makes them that top level.
Right. And those guys, I assume, I guess I don't assume, I'm asking, do you see if you've even asked them or paid attention, I guess, to them flying as young kids? Like, did they learn to fly as teenagers, or do you see any correlation there where?
No, I think it's just
natural gift.
I think it was just a natural gift, because the one individual I'm thinking of, We were lieutenants together in Korea, and he was the first one of your group, 96 grads from college that went to weapons school, and it was well ahead of everyone else in our year group that went to weapons school. But he had no flying experience prior. Just talented individual.
Is there a peak, I guess, where, as you get into your late 30s, early 40s, your vision isn't as good, your reaction time is slower, hand-eye coordination starts to, not be as sharp. Obviously, it's going to vary a little bit from guy to guy, but is there kind of for the industry and in the community where, like, once you get to a certain age, like, it's just, you're kind of viewed as, it's time for you to move on, kind of thing? Is it 40? Is it 45? Is it 38? Or isn't it? Is it just, as long as you can continue to kick ass and check the boxes, like, you can do it as long as that's taking place?
It's definitely a perishable skill. It's keeping up with the technology, because as my bros are going to torch me in the comments, that, like, what I'm talking about is antiquated shit from years ago. So it's having the desire and proactive approach to keep up with, the latest and greatest in weapons. There is an element of youth that is more beneficial, but you also gain a lot more experience, and staying alive a lot longer, and gaining all that experience is beneficial. But I think what it boils down to is you reach a certain point, whether it's, mid 30s, late 30s. Also, some of it has to do with, I'm jumping around here, sorry, but career progression. It's hard to stay in a cockpit for a long time. I was blessed with a 20-year career, and I didn't fly for 2 of the 20. So it's hard to stay in your airframe and be a career fighter pilot, because there's expectations that you're going to do other things and become more well-rounded. So there's that aspect you got to fight. But there's also a level of desire to keep up with it because of that type A aggressive, and I noticed it. You noticed it with weapons officers going through fighter weapons school or Air Force weapons school. You're at when you graduate, the day after you graduate is when your skills for the rest of your career. You will never be as sharp as you are the day you graduate, just because so much is dedicated resources-wise to train you to become the best fighter pilot that you possibly can be. You have the best resources, you have the best training, scenarios, technology, everything. So it's like that opportunity is few and far between. And now, as you get later and later in your career, it's, there's the desire, the priorities, the motivation, all that impacts, the talent pool, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's interesting because, in the special operations community, it's kind of opposite of that. The day you graduate, not from selection, because then you know nothing by comparison, but I would say, like, once you, like in the SEAL teams, you get your trident and you graduate SQT, or you get into your first platoon. Similarly, like, you know very little by comparison. And it takes years of being operational at a SEAL team or a special operations unit before you're really kind of a seasoned, firing on all cylinders, legitimate asset. And really, I think that learning curve continues to go up for a while. I would say better part of a decade, frankly. The biggest limitation, I think, for special operators is that as you get, mid to late 30s, early 40s, just physically, you just can't keep up. Skill set wise, like, you're at your absolute peak after you've been doing it for better part of 20 years. But, at that time, most guys have, knee replacements and back surgeries and, blown rotator cuffs and, a host of injuries. And when physically those things start to slow down, your vision and hand-eye coordination, reaction time, stuff like that, that's when it starts to kind of taper off. But
I think that's different for us a little bit, in the fact that when you fly these jets, you know exactly how much G-force, that's where the physicality comes in. Example, when I was on the Thunderbirds, we flew Shannon Sharp.
Oh, yeah.
dude was jacked. In fact, the G suit he had to wear, they had to modify because his quads were like 32 inches.
Wow.
And obviously a specimen. He flew, and when he got out, he laid down on the tarmac. He was exhausted. But you see, fighter pilots, you see fat fighter pilots. It's like, how much G-force, how much strain you got to do and when and how much, versus someone who's a passenger not used to that environment. They strain too much all the time, and so it's a physically exhausting experience. So I think as you get older, you can kind of dodge that, the physical elements of flying a fighter jet.
Almost like from you're conditioned to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Kind of standpoint. What's the most amount of G's you've ever experienced?
So the aircraft pulls 9. I scared myself on a maneuver in the Thunderbirds. I just put myself in a very predicament situation, and I had to pull for my life not to hit the ground and end up spiking it to 10.1 Gs.
Wow.
But it's, it's an energy depleting system. So pulling 9 Gs, if your head weighs 10 pounds, it's going to feel like it weighs 90 pounds under 9 G forces. So it's very intense, but it's short durations because you're going to deplete that energy state in a fighter jet. Once you pull back on the aircraft, you just can't produce enough thrust to maintain. Versus like the rocket was, it's only 4.5 to 5 Gs, but it's producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust versus 25,000 pounds of thrust. So it's just constant. It's 10 minutes of up and down G forces, but long durations, and that's more of an endurance sport.
From a physical and mental capacity standpoint, when you're doing the real world missions in Afghanistan, where it's an alert response type of close air support thing, you're hauling ass up there. It's about 4 hours of flight time. Like at the end of that, are you completely just smoked, physically and mentally exhausted?
I would say it's more mental.
Yeah.
But I come from an endurance background, so I like that feeling. But it's just mentally exhausting because you're concerned you're missing something, and you don't want to not get the right information, especially when you employ. I mean, there's nothing more stressful than from pushing that pickle button to waiting to impact that. Okay, did I have all the information I had? Did I make the right decision? Am I willing to live with the circumstance or the result of my decision? And that is just so mentally draining. And especially like when you're tracking a target, and it's in a vehicle, it's in a white pickup, and it's going through a village, and you're trying to keep track of it and fly the formation and check on your wingman to make sure he's not going to hit you. And then I'll throw in a little bit of weather, throw in night, MVGs. Now you're looking at things like this through a soda straw, and it can be mentally draining.
Did you ever fuck up and hit the wrong target?
I did in weapons school, and I learned my lesson. It was SAT-1, surface attack tactics. It's just we're going to do this low-level warship, just kind of Vietnam era type scenario. It's going to be low-level, avoid the threat. We're going to pop up last minute and deliver these dumb bombs, just slick. You're going to put the thing on the thing. When you're pointing at it, recover the aircraft, and they're just going to go right into it, versus guiding it, like guidance system. And it was SAT-1. And now we'd gotten through the air-to-air phase, and this was my bread and butter. I was pretty good at air-to-ground employment. So I was overly confident. We do the low level, we kill the air threat on the way in, we pop up. I think I see my target. Oh, there it is. I'm, trying to lead this formation. I roll and I drop bombs, and I'm coming off, and I'm King Kong, and all of a sudden I hear my wingman yell, "Abort, abort, abort." And I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? And my wingman was my instructor, and he's like, wrong target. And I'm like, oh my God, did I just kill someone? Thankfully, it's on a range, and it was It was a heated Maverick target, meaning it's a device on the ground that provides heat for us to use the Maverick sensor to lock onto. But you don't shoot anything. It's simulated. You don't want to hurt this heated target. It's a high value target, whatever.
And you broke the shit out of it.
I obliterated it with these 6x Mark 82s. So I more or less almost got kicked out of the program for that mistake. Big old red border. I got a D on my grade sheet for dangerous. It was
reminds me of the Top Gun Iceman. You are still dangerous.
Yeah.
Not in a good way, right?
So I learned, overconfidence is a bad thing. And I'll never forget that moment. Just Spike yelling on the radio, going, abort, thinking that you don't know what, my situational awareness just went to shit at that point. I'm like, okay, did I just hit someone on the ground? These are live bombs. I mean, playing for the real world here. So, but nothing in combat, thank God.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like that is, that type of mistake is akin to, in our world, even in training, and it's paper targets shooting a hostage. Like it's that big of a deal, and if it happens again, you're gone, kind of thing. Like maybe you get one fuck up, maybe not even one, depending on how new you are and what the circumstances are.
Yeah, I mean, frat. Obviously, everything is simulated when we're doing air-to-air employments, but frat's a big deal, especially in those red flag exercises.
Yeah.
In fact, you got hundreds of your bros and sisters in the audience, and if there's a frat, you got to stand up and you got to buy a keg for the entire audience. But you're called out in front of everyone.
Do they dogpile on that way, where like your buddies are going to bust your balls for?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but is it at all in jest, or is it like, you fucking turd? Like, how does it go down?
It's more the latter. I mean, our world, I'm sure it's similar to the world.
I mean, it's like getting shunned.
We function with fear, sarcasm, and ridicule. Yeah. That's how we live. It's that brotherhood that we give each other shit to keep us grounded and humble.
Yeah.
Because these egos can get in the way sometimes, and that's what's going to get you killed. So it's good to knock each other down.
Like if you go out that night, they're going to be like, "You're not fucking driving,"
or you are driving.
Yeah, you're not drinking.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to ask the mission that you shared, where it was the response to the being pinned down, and you were getting there as fast as you can. How fast is that? Like when you're responding to a hasty close air support call and you're a long way away, are you wide fucking open, pinned, getting, and what speed is that? Can you even mention? So
there's limitations on when you're carrying stores. Usually it's less than Mach. 0.95 is 550 knots. It's I don't know, call it 625 miles an hour. That's as fast as, and it's all relative because, well, that's the limitation, or you'll cause structural damage to the aircraft. And you don't know what the tanker situation is. So you got to play the gas a little bit here, because if you just go full throttle, you're going to get there and now you're not helpful, because now you got to turn around and go to the tanker if it's not in close proximity. So to really address your question, it's you're going about 625 miles an hour. If I was to put it in context for people to understand, it's not much faster than the haste is more of the, okay, what's going on? Because when I get there, I might have to employ right away versus, you get there, you have hours to build your 9 line, your 15 line, confirm, okay, I know where the friendlies are, or there's no friendlies. We just got to get positive idea of the threat. And we just don't want to spook the target. You're smoking a Lucky for a long time versus you hear guys screaming on the radio, and they're pinned down. They have no idea what's going on around them.
Creature comforts. when you're flying, especially in combat missions, like, is there a weirdest thing you ever brought with you, or do you ever bring like snacks and drinks and or anything outside of what you're supposed to? Or
Cross countries, pond crossings, when you try, it's not like we're flying very far in these because the range isn't that great. But you'll rejoin on a tanker to cross the Atlantic or the Pacific. You're bringing all kinds of shit with you just to, but it's what you can fit in the cockpit. I mean, the cockpit's smaller than this is, so it's pretty tight. Listen to music, food.
like, what kind of food would you bring?
Oh, it's more of like,
Protein bars and shit?
yeah, just like shelf stable beef jerky, candy bars, Cliff bars.
No In-N-Out takeout?
No, trying to think of weird. You'd get the box lunches in the military. It was like I was always eating, even in the space flight, and I ate all their food because they didn't have appetite, so I was eating all their food. It was kind of the running joke because I'm constantly swimming, biking, and running 2 to 3 hours a day, so it's like I just constantly eating.
Dip or any weird drinks or anything? I know you don't dip, but I mean, some guys do, right? Like, or I guess, is there a weirdest thing that you ever encountered somebody else bringing with them on a flight?
No, dudes would strip down naked and rejoin on the tanker.
Really?
Boom operator. I never did that.
Yeah, allegedly.
It's pretty hard to do when you're strapped in.
Well, so with that, I mean, you like, obviously you have to piss. Like, are you wearing Depends, or do you just let it?
It's called a piddle pack.
Yeah.
It's like this plastic bag with powder that coagulates
Yeah.
when it contacts urine. Yeah, the first pond crossing, I dehydrated myself. It was like a 9-hour flight. Didn't piss once. It was miserable. But then I'm like, okay, learn my lesson on that one. Just because I didn't want to use a piddle pack, but as I got older, it was like I'd go on a 45-minute BFM hop, and I had piss in between engagements.
Have you ever had to shit while flying?
No.
Never.
Never.
I mean, like it has to have happened, right?
Yeah. Oh, there's call signs that come out of that too. Because
Well, let's talk about that. What do we got?
Oh man. Oh, there was. Oh, this is this long, awkward pause. Trying to think of.
We're not going to edit that out either.
About people having diarrhea or having to take a dump on a flight.
Have you seen that where somebody just completely blows ass and shits all over themselves?
Mm-hmm. It's there's actual 3-1 terms. The brevity codes that we use. Mudslide is what it's.
Yeah.
If you call like
Yeah.
kid one mudslide,
Yeah.
that's bad news.
But it's not like there's anything you can do about it, though, right? Like, what if you have explosive diarrhea like hour one into a transatlantic flight? Like, you just
Sucks
shit
to
out
be
of luck.
you.
Yeah.
Sucks
I
to
would
be
think like a Depends or some sort of adult diaper would make the most sense for a long flight like that. Would it not?
You had the option. You had 3 options. You can do the piddle packs, you can do a catheter, or you can do a
Fuck the catheter.
diaper.
No, there's no chance. I'd rather piss myself than
Yeah.
do one of those.
I don't think I knew many people. It's like carrying an umbrella as a fighter pilot. You would rather be pouring rain and you just walk outside. You're not carrying an umbrella.
Yeah.
You'll get
I think
so much
that's a
shit.
guy
for that.
thing too.
Is it? Okay.
Well, an A personality guy thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know a single dude that ever uses an umbrella. You know? I know there are some. I just don't know any of them. All right, so I wanted to get into post Air Force career. I guess first question would be: at what point did you decide you were ready to be done, and was there a catalyst for that? And then 2, how did that kind of transition into the SpaceX? I guess transition.
Yeah. So as I approached the 20-year point, my wife ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, and it was like we were in Italy, and looking at post 20-year point, you have less control over your career. You're going to be moving every 1 to 2 years. It was just the logical decision to let's focus on the family. So we decided, all right, 20-year point, we're going to bail. I was deploying to Afghanistan my last year of my 20-year career. And I had no plan afterwards. We were just going to figure it out. We ended up moving back to New Hampshire, where I grew up, that general area, just because I had family. It's a beautiful area. It was a logical decision. She could get support down in Mass General, great hospitals down there. So we moved them back, and I deployed. And then during my deployment, I did the whole airline application. I'm like kind of dragging my feet because it wasn't something I was truly motivated about. It's just not my cup of tea. And I rekindled some relationships I'd built previously. So when I was on the Thunderbirds, I met a gentleman. His name was Jared Isaacman. Very successful entrepreneur, started his business in his parents' basement as a teenager. That grew in a multi-billion-dollar payment processing company. But his passion was aviation. So throughout his life, he took his hobby from flying single-engine prop Cessnas all the way up to business jets to flying ex-military aircraft. Wow. And when I was on the Thunderbirds, he started a civilian demonstration team doing air shows. He would hire old fighter pilots, a legend in the F-14 named Snort Snodgrass. Famous picture, actually, you see over the carrier of an F-14, on its wing. Former Thunderbirds, and so I'd met him then. Fast forward, they did that gig. I wasn't a part of it. I just met him on the air show. He did that for a couple of years, and then he decided, got burned out doing the air shows. He wanted to take his company and create a adversary commercial company, because the business model was, instead of Air Force using their own assets, an F-16, an F-15, an F-22, and dumbing it down and not allowing, blue guys to train appropriately, let me provide a commercial solution for that by acquiring fleets of ex-military aircraft, hire ex-fighter pilots, and provide the service. It's a fraction of the cost. Operating an F-16 is about $25,000 an hour, and F-22 is about $80,000 an hour. He was offering a service to the military for like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 an hour. Build it and they will come. So he started to acquire fleets from New Zealand, from the Czech Republic, from France, Spain, and it grew into this amazing business. Got a contract at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, pretty much providing adversary support for those red flag exercises. Now, when you talk about the capabilities of a 5th gen, an F-22 and F-35, 4 F-16s isn't much of a threat. It's almost better. Let's launch a fleet, bunch of iron in the sky, and F-22s can do the whack-a-mole and practice, against multiple targets. And so it just, point being, it grew into this huge billion-dollar business, and his company was called Draken International. So when I retired, I reached out and said, hey, how's this Draken thing doing? And we had had some conversations because I was the adversary commander before he actually got contracts. And he was trying to figure out, would the Air Force be interested in a commercial solution on top of what the Air Force provides? And so it was very successful. And when I retired, I'm like, hey, you need any help? And he hired me to do some business development. I started flying the A4, old Vietnam era platform the Navy flew. And so we did that for a couple of years, 5 years. And he went public with his day job, which he needed to divest himself of Draken. So he sold Draken and wasn't crazy about the new leadership. So I left and retired, and I'm like, I'm done, I'm out. A couple of days later, he brings me on to his payment processing company, his working strategy. That didn't last very long because he started having conversations with SpaceX. And it was about investment. He was just very interested in what SpaceX was doing at the time. They're landing these, autonomous drone ships. These boosters were getting reused. It's just some really cool stuff was happening in the commercial space industry. And so he's like, hey, I'd love to invest. Oh, by the way, if you're ever looking for anyone to volunteer to be the first commercial, I would love to put my name in the hat. They're like, well, funny that you asked. We actually are looking for the first. And so he jumped on that opportunity. And he never wanted to make it, about the billionaire going to space. It had to have a greater cause. So he got his inner team together and pitched this idea of Inspiration 4, what affectionately became the name of the program, Inspiration 4. And the idea was it's going to be the first all-civilian mission to space. We're going to prove that anyone could go to space. And so we randomly selected his crew. He wasn't going to bring his buddies. We're going to randomly select his crew and put them through 6 months of training and send them to space. And it was this partnership and collaboration with SpaceX. And so I threw I'm like, I'll help out any and every way possible. So I was the mission director on the ground. Anything from getting coffee for the crew to logistics to helping them train to fundraising, because we wanted to partner with a nonprofit organization. So we had some phone calls, and it was an easy partnership with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. They were awesome from the very beginning. Called them the day before Christmas in 2020. And they answered the phone call and were ready to jump on board. So that was who we were going to partner with and try to, improve life on Earth. At the same time, we want to push the envelope and see what space exploration is all about. Very successful mission. They went to space September 15th, 2021. And just before that, Jared's like, this is awesome. SpaceX, what else can we do to push the envelope, with your quest to go to the moon and Mars and beyond. And so that's what started, that was the catalyst for this follow-on program called Polaris. It's a series of up to 3 missions, and it's a developmental test program. And it's very similar to what NASA did with Project Gemini. So you got initial space flight with Mercury. Let's just prove that we can get to space. Suborbital, a couple orbital missions. But then fast forward to the 60s and 70s, you got the Apollo program. We went to the moon. Well, there was a lot of things they had to figure out in the 60s in order to go to the moon. They had to figure out how to dock a vehicle in space. They had to figure out how to do a spacewalk. So it was a developmental program. It was, 12 missions over a 5-year period in the 60s. And that was kind of our model. Hey, let's mimic the Gemini program and let's come up with this Polaris program that will focus on what challenges does SpaceX have to solve before they go, help NASA get to the moon and how to get to Mars. They've never done a spacewalk before. That's a start. Let's push the envelope. Let's go further than anyone's gone in a long time, over 50 years. Communication is going to be a challenge with these longer duration missions. How do we solve that? So that was discussed. And so we came up with a series of up to 3 missions. First one, Polaris Dawn. Mission 2 was TBD. And then the third mission was going to be the first human flight of Starship, which is SpaceX's next generation rocket, the one that they're on test flight 8 or 9. It's still under test and it's never been flown before, but that will be the vehicle. It's the largest vehicle ever built, bigger than Saturn V. That's the vehicle that's going to go to the moon and Mars, in my opinion. And so that was the framework behind what we wanted to accomplish. I was selected based on my contributions to the Inspiration 4, as well as my test background and my flying background. And then the other 2 crew members, Anna Menon and Sarah Gillis, were involved in Inspiration 4 as well, but they were engineers with SpaceX. But they were selected based on their contributions and their qualifications. So that's kind of the beginning of this Polaris program. And then we started our training for Polaris Dawn.
This is going to seem like a ridiculous response to the amount of information you just gave me. Am I the only asshole that thought it was pronounced Gemini and not Gemini?
Dude, for the longest time, I started off Gemini.
Yeah, that's not what it is.
And Jared always called it Gemini. And I'm like, we're in these interviews and we're using these different terms for this analogy. And I'm looking it up. I'm like researching it. Everywhere you look on the internet, it can be either way. Gemini or Gemini. So I converted over his Gemini. Yeah, so and now it's in my brain as Gemini.
So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways.
Right. Is there any doubt in your mind that we actually went to the moon when we said we did?
Here come all the comments in this. I believe we do. This is my opinion, kid's opinion. I have no additional insight that the public doesn't have. Yeah. I do believe we went. Yeah.
Why do you think that there is, as of late, so much controversy with it? I don't remember ever hearing about it growing up, like that there was any dispute. Seems like, man, I don't know if it's because SpaceX and there's like this invigorated interest in space exploration and travel. But it's like in the last few years, it seems like there's a ton of argument about whether or not it happened or not.
I cannot tell you what would instigate all these additional conversations and the conspiracies, and I don't know.
Do you know of anybody that's like in the industry that disputes it? Or is it pretty much widely agreed upon? Anybody who's in space exploration whatsoever, that industry. Do you know of anybody that doubts it?
I'm sure there are. It's not like I know everyone in the industry. We have partnerships with NASA because they provided a lot of resources for us to train. Yeah. But most of those relationships are acquaintances. It's not like I have these deep conversations. And I would probably say that anyone who doubts it might not be
welcomed into it.
Well, I wouldn't say welcome. It's just they might be past their prime.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
I have a note about Sarah Gillis performed the first known violin solo in space. Yeah. What was the inspiration for that?
So we had four main objectives. A little bit of backstory, and then I'll get to your question. The four primary objectives based on the conversations we had with SpaceX and Elon and what they wanted to accomplish as well as what we were capable of. And it ended up being do the first commercial spacewalk, go higher in Earth orbit than anyone's ever flown, and further than anyone for non-lunar missions as well. Yeah. And then test a laser communication in space for the very first time, Starlink, never been tested before. And that's because that's critical for these longer duration missions because it's better broadband, it's lower latency. And then if we're going to, we want to maximize this opportunity. So we ended up doing 40 science and research experiments, all things that address these long duration missions in the future, because this thing is the biggest limfac for space. We're built for 1G on planet Earth. Up there, it's a challenge. So that third objective, to test Starlink from space for the very first time, we wanted to do a big event, something that was inspiring, because that's a big part of our mission is to inspire this next generation and get them involved in STEM and want to be exploring the stars. And Sarah was professionally trained violinist growing up. She's awesome. So the idea was this flash mob. Let's get her playing. Let's do this live webcast on YouTube and NX and her performing. And then it leads into all these orchestras around the world utilizing Starlink in these remote locations, performing the same music and
that's cool.
Piece it all together. So that was a big part of her playing the violin in space.
Super cool.
Yeah.
How long were you guys there for?
So we were up there for 5 days. The biggest limitation with the capsule is you can survive for about 6-ish days. You have concerns with the waste locker for how much waste you create, as well as how much gases you're bringing, oxygen, nitrogen, keep you alive. The whole purpose of the design behind Dragon capsule is to take astronauts to and from the space station, ISS, which is great. It's 48 hours-ish, plus or minus, depending on the orbit, to get them to the station. They dock. and then they're in the station for 6 months, and then they just utilize the capsule to get home. But it was the longest duration, 5 days for our mission, because we went past the station.
By several fold, right? I mean, several X higher.
Yeah, so they're right around 420 kilometers. The original record was Gemini 11 back in 1966. Pete Conrad and Dick Gordon went up to 1,368 kilometers. And we wanted to break that record, and so we set our sights on 1,400 kilometers. The concern with that is it puts you in the lower portions of the Van Allen belt, which are just higher radiation levels created by gravitational pull of the planet. So we ended up doing a highly elliptical. The flight profile was a highly elliptical orbit. So the apogee, the furthest we got away from the planet, was that 1408. But on the backside of that orbit, we're skimming the atmosphere at 190 kilometers. So it's just giving us this highly elliptical profile. And the reason why we did that was to mitigate our time in those Van Allen belts because of the radiation hits. There's modeling, and we have the data from the Apollo missions that transit the Van Allen belts going to the moon and back. But it's not like we spend much time there because we're below that in low Earth orbit. That's still part of low Earth orbit, but it was a concern, and we had modeling data, but the concern is on the systems, the hardware, software, as well as the human body. But based on this profile and what they figured out, all the smart brains behind the engineering figured out, okay, this is about the equivalent of living on the station for 3 months. The 8 orbits we did at that altitude, which is like the equivalent of about 70 X-rays, radiation hits. So no twitches yet, no growth.
I mean, I'm assuming that there's mechanisms put in place in the capsule to help minimize that. Is it copper, or like what do you use?
No, there's a little bit of shielding, but it I think some of the best barriers are like water. I'm not quite sure, but I think.
Is our lead, like you use the lead aprons for? Can you not line it with lead and?
Well, then you're impacting the structure of the vehicle. Before they considered any of that, they're just doing the modeling to figure out, okay, what is the theoretical impact of the radiation? And since it wasn't much to, we didn't have to do any additional mitigations to protect ourselves because we were willing to take the risk of those orbits.
Yeah. What is the distance that you're considered legitimately outside of the Earth's orbit entirely?
So the Kármán line is the international acceptance of where space begins, and it's his name Theodore von Kármán is the scientist who figured out it's right around that 100 kilometers, the 62 miles, and it's the accepted definition is any conventional aircraft can operate below that, but as soon as it starts going above that, it can't aerodynamics and there's no atmosphere.
So I thought that you mentioned it's where you guys were at. It was still considered like partial orbit, or are you completely outside of it?
So we 190. As far as that 100 kilometers.
No, I know you just said 100, but maybe I misheard it, or I'm on drugs. I thought you mentioned that even at the 1400 part, like, is there still some sort of orbitational or gravitational pull or something like?
Well, gravity's constantly affecting you. So we travel, our orbital velocity is 17,500 miles an hour. So, but you're still impacted by gravity. Gravity's still pulling you, but you're traveling so fast, you're just falling around the planet. As soon as you go less than 17.5, gravity's just going to pull you back into the atmosphere. As soon as you hit the atmosphere, you're going to slow down, drag. So as far as orbit, as long as you maintain 17.5, you can stay up there. As far as the different layers, you have low Earth orbit, and then at some point it's beyond that. You start going towards the moon.
I mean, I guess at what distance are you not in orbit at all?
Escape velocity, which is 25,000 miles an hour. So if you can maintain 25, you will leave the gravitational pull of the planet.
So it's based more on speed than distance.
Correct.
Okay. Forgive my ignorance on
No,
space. Like I don't understand. Like seeing some of the demonstrations of gravity in space and how, like our solar system, it was like a table with like cloth on it, and it's like the Earth is in the middle and it's bending, and like I'm trying to understand. I'm just like, dude, this is making me feel dumber every second I'm trying to pay attention to it. But
I know this much, and I've just exceeded my capacity of orbital mechanics.
It's fascinating stuff. Is it safe to assume or correct to assume that your ability to travel that speed is because of the lack of gravitational pull at that elevation? 17,000 miles per hour. You can go that fast because the same rules don't apply from a physics standpoint on Earth as they do at that elevation, correct?
Because you're outside of all the drag, you're above the atmosphere, so you're not impacted by all the molecules you're hitting. Yeah. So like when we launch, all of our human space flights launched out of Cape Canaveral, Kennedy Space Center. And it will go up, other than the suborbital flights like that Blue Origin flight, it will go up the inclination of 51.6 degrees. It's a latitude right up the coastline. And that allows us for, if there's an emergency, the rocket blows up, the capsule will be ejected and will land in the water off the coast. That's just to get us through the atmosphere. Once we get above the atmosphere, we level off actually. And then we can accelerate because we're above all that drag. And now we just use all that fuel from the boosters to accelerate to get up to that 17.5. And then once you're at 17.5 in space, there's no drag. Well, there's minor little molecules, but it's not enough drag to slow you down. So as long as once you get to that 17.5, you can maintain orbital velocity. And now you can use your thrusters on the capsule to work your way up, phase up to a higher altitude. And you'll burn on one side and you'll reach the higher altitude on the other side. And now you can just maintain orbit.
So maintaining orbit doesn't require a lot of fuel with almost no drag at that.
No, most of those firing of the thrusters on the capsule will just help orientation of the capsule. Yeah. So you can maintain line of sight with satellites for communication or for the solar panels, because it's an energy depleting system. We have the trunk. It's just an extension of the capsule. And we jettison that trunk right before we come home, a couple hours prior, just because it will burn up in the atmosphere on reentry. Yeah. So you use those thrusters to orient the capsule. And then when it's time to come home, you'll jettison the trunk, point the capsule in the direction of your velocity, and you'll fire the thrusters to brake in the direction you're going. That will slow you down enough where now gravity takes over, pulls you back into the atmosphere. You're still traveling 17.5-ish, but just enough less in order to re-enter. And as soon as you hit the atmosphere, that's where all the acceleration happens. Because now you're just hitting.
Now, from a feeling standpoint, is that pretty violent?
It's not as violent as pulling 9Gs in a fighter, but it's just different because it's an endurance experience. And based on the orientation of the seat, it's a different axis. It's through the chest versus head to toe. This is the Z axis. Y is like a car crash, getting T-boned. You're jarring of your organs. And then the X axis is through the chest. So in a fighter jet, we're sitting here and I pull back on the stick. I'm using centrifugal force. That feeling of G-forces is from head to toe. The concern there is the pooling of the blood in the lower extremities. You pass out because the oxygen's not in your brain. In a capsule, they orient the seat so you're on your back for launch. And now as you accelerate, that G-force is through the chest. And it just feels like it's 4.5 to 5 Gs that you experience in the first portion of the ride from launch. It's like this slow-mo, engines light off, 1.7 million pounds of thrust, 9 Merlin engines. It lifts you off and you accelerate. and you build up to that 4.5 Gs to about 2.5 minute point. That's when MECO happens, main engine cutoff. This is where the first booster will separate. And that's a very violent experience because you're thrust forward in your seat, you're hanging on your straps. Tom Hanks, the Apollo 13, kind of that violent images you see on the video, it's pretty close. A little cinematic and played up a little bit, but you're flown forward, you're floating for about 10 seconds for that separation to happen. And then the second stage, which is only one engine, it produces 220,000 pounds of thrust. That's going to take you the next 6 minutes. So 2.5, separate, float, 10 seconds, second stage lights, boom, you're back in your seat. You're back to that 4.5 Gs. And now it's 6 minutes until you burn out that second stage. And now you're in space, on orbit. You separate from, it's called SECO, second stage cutoff. And that second stage will separate. And now it's just the capsule and the trunk, and you're in space. And same concept, as soon as it separates, you're flung forward, and now you're floating for the next 5 days.
And that's a zero gravity feeling.
That's the zero gravity, and it's pretty effed up. I mean, it's this transition you have to go through, and that's why we did a lot of the training that we did, because something I constantly tell people is that it's like this: you're forced to adapt to the circumstances. And that's why we do some of these things that put us in situations where you're required to get comfortable in uncomfortable scenarios, like climbing a mountain. Mountaineering is a perfect analogy of what it was like on space. And you have to deal with the circumstances. When we climbed Cotopaxi down in Ecuador, it takes multiple days to get up towards the summit. You're cold, you're sleep deprived, you're dealing with the environment. You're hungry, dehydrated, you're dealing with the pressure. All those things you have to deal with. You can't just get off the mountain. Similar fashion, you're on orbit and you might be sick. You might, it's called space adaptation syndrome, that space motion sickness. There's a fluid shift that happens. So the fluid shifts inside your body, causes this fullness of space fog. Your brain literally lifts inside the skull. So all these things are happening. And oh, by the way, you know what is up and down might change over time as that capsule is rotating. You look outside and Earth it screws with your mind, and you have to. And now you're just the gravity pulling on your body, your bones, your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons. It's not doing that. So you have to adapt to this new dimension that you're not used to.
Yeah, it's like for the first time in 50 years, your body's experiencing something it's never experienced before. Because even in like the saltwater tanks that give you that feeling, it's still not the same as. Have you done those? The free floating. I'm trying to think of what the fucking name is. It's some sort of immersion thing where it's like pitch black, no sound.
Oh yeah. They have one at the. I saw one. I didn't get in it.
Yeah, I'd be curious for you to do that. And compare it to that experience.
Isn't it like you take a nap and it's the equivalent of like a 40-minute nap is like the equivalent of like 8 hours sleep or something?
It could be. I haven't done it either. I know a lot of people that use it as like recovery mechanisms for high level performance athletes. But I'd be curious to see what the experience is like comparatively. But
a common analogy is like hang upside down from your bed in that blood rush, or you're scuba diving and you're going down head first, and you work in those different dimensions. That's you can't replicate 0G on planet other than the 0G flights, but that's kind of a novelty of 20 to 30 seconds exposure, and it's not the same thing.
So the anti-gravity capsules here on Earth that they use to train astronauts, are those not the same thing? I'm
not familiar with.
Don't they have those, or am I thinking?
They have suspension systems. Argos, NASA uses. We used a suspension system. It's almost like a Cirque du Soleil kind of harness system that it takes the weight off of.
Yeah. So in essence, no, like that experience that you felt up there, there's no way to being underwater and rolling around is not even close to the same feeling. Yeah. No. When you were describing the actual launch up and the different stages, as the pilot, How much of that entire process are you manually controlling, or is it mostly automated?
It's all automated.
So like what, not to sound like a dick, what are you doing?
Fair question. Shots fired. No, I mean,
in case it doesn't happen,
there is a lot. You can manually operate. We're trained to manually operate the capsule. But even the manual operation is literally pushing buttons to roll, pitch, yaw, up, down. It's very simplistic in its operation. There's no stick and throttle. There's no none of that. And it's more of the mindset of contingencies. And if you look at the capsule, there's 4 seats. Mission specialist Sarah Nana sat on the outrigger seats, and Jared's on the left, and I'm in the pilot seat. He's in the commander seat. And there's 3 screens, and we each have one dedicated screen, and we share the one in the middle. And everything's right there. There's different screens you can pull up for the systems and the flight, like what you would imagine for flight instruments for an aircraft. That gives you different orientation displays. There's the world map, so you can see where your orbit is in relationship to a God's eye view of the planet. So you kind of know where you are in the orbit, in the phase of flight. So everything is right there. But as far as you're strapped in and you're along for the ride, it's unwavering level of trust, especially for a fighter pilot, when I'm in control of my destiny. And if it doesn't work out for me, I can punch.
Yeah. None of that.
There is a T handle I could turn, but shit's gone wrong if we're anywhere near that.
Yeah. Are you at all claustrophobic, or are there, if somebody were claustrophobic and in that environment, would that exacerbate that, you think?
I wouldn't say so much in the capsule. The capsule's pretty roomy. I mean, relatively speaking, it's like 12 or 14 feet wide. Man, all that information dumps after you don't use it for a while. It was only 6 months ago. But in the capsule, it's especially once you get to orbit, because in training, we trained for 3 years in a simulated capsule. It's replica. Everything works just as it would in space. But it's all that volume up here that you don't utilize in training. And so you're trying to figure out ways to coordinate and orchestrate everything. You're bumping into each other. Once you get to orbit, you have all this volume that you can now float up to and get out of the way, and it's pretty easy. So there's no claustrophobic inside the capsule. I wouldn't think would be an issue. What I would say, though, in the suit. So when you're pressurized, especially when you start bleeding down to a vacuum, because there's no airlock system. And for us to do the spacewalk, you get in your spacesuit, because once you get to orbit, you get out of your spacesuit. Once it's a habitable environment, the atmosphere is safe inside the capsule. You can open the visor, you get out of your spacesuit, and you get into your pajamas, fleece, sweatpants, and you hang out for days doing that. But when it's time for another critical phase of flight, spacewalk, you got to bring the entire capsule down to vacuum, because there's no airlock chamber like they have in ISS. You get in your spacesuit and you pressurize it. It's all umbilical. It's fed to from the capsule. And that feeling is, I could see where people would get claustrophobic, because, you're a single pane away from death with the visor. So it's like, I hope this gas that I'm breathing is going to keep me alive.
Because it's seconds if it's not, right? Like you wouldn't make it. Yeah. Did you do the spacewalk?
So yes and no. Technically, by definition, we are all 4 involved, because there's no airlock. So you open the hatch and we're all pressurized and we're all doing the spacewalk. Physically, to go outside, we had opportunity for 2 astronauts to do that because of the limited amount of gas we had to do this. So Jared went out first. He did a science experiment, mobility testing of the suit, because this is a brand new spacesuit design. Something hasn't been done over 40 years. The EMU suits that the NASA astronauts use is something that's limited resources, wouldn't fit volume-wise in our capsule. So that's why we utilized a umbilical system. So that was the biggest, the long pole in the tent for our mission, was designing this new spacesuit, which was a huge feat by the engineers at SpaceX. So we were all in the same suit, in our little, which is an extension of the spacecraft itself. And so Jared went out, and he came back in, then Sarah went out, and she came back in, and we closed the hatch, repressurized, and then depressurized our suit.
How long were each of them out?
About 15 minutes. We initially had an issue with the hatch. So opening the hatch, the procedure was Jared's going to manually uncrank it, crack it. Once it was cracked, he would get out of the way, and it would automatically, the computers would open the hatch for the remainder of the way and stow it kind of out of the way on these hinges. Well, as soon as he cracked it and started to back away, it just slowly sealed back. And so he'd go back and he'd lift it and open it a little bit more. But it would just continue to close on its own. And what we found out is that residual pressure from our suits are pressurized. That little bit of pressure inside the capsule would cause this closing of the hatch. So again, our awesome training from SpaceX, they realized, all right, the backup game plan is just to do a manual hatch opening. So piece of cake. You just open the hatch, and so that ate into a little bit of our time, but he ended up going out 15, coming back in. Sarah went out 15. And so the whole ordeal was about 2 hours of vacuum.
Did that hatch stay open while they're out?
Yeah, so because the umbilical's in the hatch, and our role for the three that remained inside was umbilical management, because everything's floating around. So you got to make sure we don't pinch his life support on something, or it gets caught on something. And then if anything happens with the systems, we're there on the computers and looking at the monitors, so we can respond in case of an emergency.
Did you do the golden retriever on a Sunday drive, poke your head out of the hatch at least?
Can neither confirm nor deny. No, we had too many cameras. The temptation was there, man.
You weren't supposed to, I assume, then?
No, because we're, in case there was issues, we had to be strapped in our seats for emergency deorbit. Because there's only so much, because there was an option for us to emergency deorbit unpressurized. And when you're in these suits, all the volume in the capsule goes away. And Jared's not a small; he's like 6'1", 6'2". So he's occupying a lot of the space. And obviously the girls are tiny, and I'm 5'9". So, but when you're all pressurized in these suits, any extra room is gone.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the surrealness of witnessing that. I mean, whether you went out or not, just having the hatch open like you're in fucking space.
Yeah.
Did that moment hit you like at a certain point? Was it the whole time, or like was there a specific instance where you just kind of looked around like, how the fuck is this real?
Yeah, it hits you when you first look at Earth. When you get a chance to get out of your suit and get up to the window and check out what the planet looks like. And people talk about the overview effect, and it's literally a cognitive shift that happens in your brain. And it impacts everyone differently, whether it's intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. It's something I hope more people get to experience, because it's really difficult to describe. And I'm not making this shit up. It's just this radiant glow that comes from the planet. And I think it has a lot to do with, like, when we look up in the sky, the light is refracted and filtered by the atmosphere and all the gases in our atmosphere. Looking down, it just looks different. It's just a different radiant glow. And it's almost like this transcendence of your senses. Like, it's almost like you can feel it, not only just what you're seeing, it's all these senses are impacted. The other thing is, like, you're traveling so fast. And so the sunrises and sunsets happen every hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
So the light is constantly evolving and changing over time. So you look out and it's just totally different from what you just saw, seconds ago. And The atmosphere too, because when it's the phenomenon, it's called the thin blue line. You might see some images of a really thin blue line on the horizon, because as the sun begins to pierce the atmosphere for sunrise, and it just creates this like radiant sun rays, and it just engulfs the planet. So all that, to say that it has this impact on your perception. On top of that, it's like from the altitude that we saw it from, no one's been up there in over 50 years. And so to see the planet from that perspective, all you can really make out are continents and oceans. There's no borders, there's no details you can see. It's like this, to me, it's like this visual illustration of what life must have been like back at the creation of heavens and earth. You can't see much other than the planet, which is round. And then, 45 minutes later, you're on the backside, you're skimming the atmosphere. You can see contrails. You can see the speck in front of the contrail. You can make out all the geographical features. You're trying to look for specific things in certain regions. So to see in its that evolution of happening, getting lower and higher, it screws with your brain. It's really cool.
I mean, it's remarkable just listening to you describe it. How would you synopsize how it impacted you?
Oh, this is tough. So, honestly and sincerely, when I first saw it, I was like, I felt so insignificant, because all I could think about is like, there's 8 billion people down there. And here we are in this, capsule, this metal tin can going around 17.5, just so everyone down on the planet going about their day. And then you got time doesn't make sense anymore, because your days and nights are hour and a half long. And so time is all screwed up. And then at night, you can really see the how frail and how thin our atmosphere looks, when we think it's like miles. But in reality, it's just this tiny, really thin layer. And it just looks frail. And so there's that element. And then you look out in the other direction, it's just black. And all you can imagine is the universe is just endless. So you're intimidated by the darkness. So all those things together, I'm like, man, I feel so insignificant in what we're doing and who we are, and, my time here on the planet. But it really isn't until I got back and I'm trying to explain all this, and I still can't articulate it like I want to. But the initial reaction I get from people is this mental simulation. They immediately put themselves in that scenario. And they're like, either, holy cow, man, I would do anything to go to space. What does it take to go to space? What should I be doing? Or it's like, I don't know, there's this waffling going on. It'd sound so cool, but I don't think I could do it. And then there's the, hell no, I will never consider going to space. And so the fact that they're doing this mental simulation, it's just like, there's relevance in that, and the fact that it's so much bigger than myself. I'm trying to make significance out of it for myself and my perception, when in reality, it's so much bigger than that. And I've noticed this throughout my career and things I've tried to accomplish. It's like, there's so much greater purpose in what we're doing. And I need to keep that at the forefront, thinking about and reflecting upon my experiences in space and feeling insignificant. It's not about kid. It's me sharing the message and the story and my experiences to hopefully encourage, inspire this next generation to want to do that same thing and willing to take the risk. Even if you're a friggin' C and D student growing up and motion sick and scared of heights and all
Lack
these
of
things.
attention span.
Yeah,
No patience.
attention span.
Man, it's so cool to hear you describe it. I am curious, did it change? I mean, obviously it changed your perspective on things, or generally speaking, but is there a tangible way to describe how it changed the way you look at anything or your perspective on life other than what you've mentioned?
It has, but I still revert back to being human. And what I mean by that is like, I'm not sweating the small stuff like I used to. Like, I'm trying to make the most of life and do the right things and have purpose. I still get flustered, shitty drivers and airports and all the normal stresses that we fuss over. But I have less time re-gauging my brain going, okay, it doesn't matter. And I think the reason why I want to speak and talk about my experiences is because it does keep me grounded, and it reminds me that it isn't about me, and always have that greater purpose in mind. I guess that's, I don't know how I would describe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're one of how many people that have been that far away from the planet?
So for orbital flight, I think it's like mid 600s, 650 in the history of spaceflight. Isn't many. If you look at the history of mankind, that number is going to dramatically go up. Because the vision that Elon has and SpaceX wants to do with Starship, those vehicles are, in theory, would hold 100, 150 passengers. And he wants to launch 3 a day, every day, once it's going. I believe it. I was not a believer, 3-4 years ago before this whole thing. I'm like, I was ignorant to what SpaceX was doing anyways, but landing boosters and all that. But now that I've kind of seen behind the curtain and where they're going and what they're capable of, it's inevitable. I mean, it's going to happen. And
I'm assuming you've met him.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression?
I like Elon. He's a great guy. He's very engaging. We've had dinner a couple times, part of the program, and he's tireless. He's a visionary. He's just constantly thinking about, just the little conversations that we had with him. It was, he's thinking on so many levels. He's a genuine individual.
Yeah, I mean, it's neat to hear. I know colonizing Mars is a big bucket list ticket item, whatever you want to call it. It's a goal of his. What is your take on that, and how do you see that actually transpiring?
I think we're doing it for the right reasons. I think we start with the moon, and as we learn how to get back to the lunar surface, everything that we always got to keep in mind is how is that going to benefit our quest to get to Mars. So it's in parallel, and then once we get to the lunar surface, it's going to be an easier process to continue this on and eventually get to Mars. It's there's a lot of science benefit to going back to the moon and Mars, and what we can accomplish with mining and the environment of microgravity and in space has already allowed us the opportunity to achieve a lot of inventions and benefit to life on Earth. And so I think those elements and aspects are good enough reasons. Now you throw on we're human. We have curiosity, and we have the capability. Why not? And who's to say an asteroid or something is on target to hit planet Earth in 20, 30 years that completely wipes us out? It's insurance policy to figure out how to go live in low Earth orbit and live on moon, live on Mars.
Do you know what his ultimate goal is in terms of the Mars specific aspect of developing it, like what that looks like?
I certainly can't speak on his behalf. I mean, if you look at his companies, it all seems to line up, the capability of electric cars and Boring Company to be able to create infrastructure on the planets, and how that's all going to come about. Starlink, another capability that is critical for these longer duration missions. When you talk about 7-8 months to get to Mars, sending a combite back to the planet if it takes too long, by the time the response gets back, the problem's already solved or something catastrophic has happened. But with laser communication, that improves that capability. So Starlink, Boring, Tesla, SpaceX, it all kind of aligns, whether that is his intent or not. How we collectively, because it's not just SpaceX, it's going to take a whole country, and it needs to be us. It's the high ground. It's the ultimate high ground. It's if we do lose to Russia or China, we can't afford to take that risk to not pursue it, because they are. I hate to be late to that fight, and we may never recover from that race.
So as it stands right now, or the projected time frame of if and when it gets to the point where you can shuttle people to Mars to live or spend time, whatever you want to call it, it's a 7 to 8 month trip.
That's what I've read, 7 to 8 months.
If it was possible now, or if it's possible in your lifetime where physically you could do it and want it, like, would you go there?
I would. I guess it depends on
what the setup is like.
Take my family.
Yeah. I'm curious, going back to being in the capsule, and you mentioned the contrast between seeing Earth and the glow from it, and then the contrast of just pitch black.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever find yourself kind of staring out into the dark and almost being freaked out by it?
Yeah, just because to me, it felt intimidating. In one respect, there was that aspect, but in another respect, it was beautiful because there was, especially on like night 4, we were checking out night, and you could see the moon, you could see billions of stars. We picked up a train of Starlink satellites, that constellation, that line you can see sometimes. Mm-hmm. This one passed, pretty close to us, relatively speaking. And then you look down at the planet, and you got, all the cultural lighting that's lighting up the planet. You got all the thunderstorms popping off, and then you see the northern lights, and then you see the glow of the atmosphere on the horizon. So all those things together was just mesmerizing. But everything is dark. I enjoyed more looking at the planet. This way was a little more intimidating.
Yeah. Were you able to see anything out into space that was discernible, that you recognized?
No, I think you got to look at the relativity of distances. We're not that much closer, albeit we're above the atmosphere, so we're not polluted per se in what we're able to see. But it's not like the moon looks like this. It's relatively the same, and the more stars.
Yeah, I guess, have you seen some of the like pictures and footage from the Mars rover showing what non-air pollute, like it's breathtakingly beautiful. Were you able to see similar types of?
Not that intense. Not what you're referring to.
Yeah. Like where you can see like like galaxies almost. Or
yeah, no, no, it wasn't
like
that.
Yeah. I am curious from kind of a logistics standpoint. What did you bring to eat on the trip? Did your appetite change at all? Is it different trying to swallow and other normal bodily functions like taking a shit? Like, is that different? A lot different, or is it not that much different?
5 days, no dump from me.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
literally no
shit.
Did anybody else?
No.
Nobody shat in 5 days. 5 days shit free. Yeah, that's impressive.
Lock yourself up.
I mean, you had the ability to, though, if need be.
So you got the waste locker is just this tube about that big around, about that long. It's a vacuum. So whatever you put in that, it sucks it in. Yeah, there's a hose for taking a piss. For the suit, when you're in a dynamic phase of flight, you're in your spacesuit, you're wearing a diaper, a MAG, a maximum absorbency garment. They get it's a government. You're going to name it something other than diaper.
Yeah.
But back to eating. So the first 3 days, the spacewalk was on day 3. So we're going to bring the capsule down to vacuum day 3. Anything that's exposed to a vacuum is going to go to crap. So fresh food had to be consumed before day 3. So what we packed was like cold pizza, empanadas, these little Hawaiian roll sandwiches. It's like camping. There's your appetite's a little suppressed. Mine, didn't get motion sickness, didn't get anything. Space motion sickness is different from Earth.
How so?
They don't know why. They're trying to figure it out. We did one experiment where they think hypothesis is the alignment of your eyes. So if all the PIs of the experiments are going to cringe when I start trying to explain this. If there is a delta between your eye alignment, your body is adjusting to what you see, what you perceive. So the fact that your body works to make those adjustments, once you get up there and you don't have the impact of gravity, your body can continue to adjust and try to figure it out. Whereas if they're aligned, they don't work as hard, so they're not used to adjusting. So now you're up there and it's all screwed up and you don't know what's up, and now your body can't adjust.
Is it more like a vertigo feeling?
It's this cross-couple illusion that you experience of tumbling sensation. Everyone kind of feels it as some perception of it, and it's that transition from positive G to microgravity 0G during the launch phase. And now, for me, it was this off-axis tumbling for a couple of seconds. It's just like, whoa. But then it slowly dampened out, and I was fine. Now you're just trying to get used to the fullness and the what's up, what's down. A couple of the crew members did get space adaptation syndrome, so they're motion sickness, and so you got to deal with those circumstances.
Throwing up into the shit vacuum.
You have a bag, emesis bag. So the point being is like your appetite is suppressed. So I was eating all my crew members' food, and they were giving me everything and anything. Junky, hungry. I have a big appetite from working out so much. But otherwise, once all the fresh food's gone, it's like shelf-stable food. M&Ms were fun to pass. Clip bars, beef jerky, cheese, Nutella packets, peanut butter packets.
Did you just drink water, or did you bring
water? Yeah. We had coffee for a little bit, cold coffee. They froze it, stuck it in. That's what kept fresh food cold for a while. But eventually it thaws out and warms up. But drinking water was difficult because the air pocket would just stay because gravity's not pulling on it, So you would take a sip and you would have this air pocket and you couldn't get rid of it. So we figured out like you could do this centrifugal swing of the bottle to get the water down at the top, and then you could take a squirt and then do the swing. So
would a straw not work?
I don't know.
You guys didn't bring straws?
No straws.
To me, that seems like the obvious fix. Bring a fucking straw.
Well, they have those packets. I don't know why we went with water bottles. Let's take
of all the things you thought of.
Yeah. Damn it. Who forgot the straws?
Is swallowing liquid or food harder? Is no different?
No different.
Taking a piss doesn't feel any different?
It is harder. Was it because of the diaper, or was it because of... It's almost like the urge to urinate is you got to get it flowing.
Really? It's like it's not there?
Yeah, the urge is, it takes more concentration.
So it's like day one of the military when they're screaming at you for the piss test.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost like stage fright. Yeah, it might be a psychological. I had no issues. I got an old man bladder. Man, I was... Yeah, I was a little too hydrated, and we were delayed on launch, and I couldn't hold it. So I went like 8 times. I was drenched in my spacesuit, and I was freezing. And all I wanted to do was get on orbit and get out of my spacesuit.
In terms of like medical equipment that's brought in case of an emergency, how significant is a med kit that you guys brought? Like, do you have Advil and Band-Aids and shit like that? Or like, what all did you bring med kit wise?
So we had a whole soft case full of med kit for emergencies, for triage, or whatever. Coincidentally, our 40 science and research experiments were all addressing medical concerns. You know, some of it was triage related, some of it was just figuring out how to use a CGM, a glucose monitor in space, because things don't, drawing blood, little sample, just taking a little sample of blood, you're used to gravity flow. Doesn't happen in space. So they designed new little vials to be able to take blood. CGM, some worked, some didn't. So simple stuff like that needs to be figured out before we send people on a 7-month journey to Mars. We tested a ambulance in a box from space for the very first time, and it utilized Starlink to downlink all the vital signs. And it would take EKG, blood pressure, oxygen, pulse, respirations. And it was all these leads you attached yourself, and the case would send the data down via Starlink. So that was cool to test for the first time. CPR. Doing CPR in space is very difficult.
Just being able to get enough pressure into
equal and opposite reaction. So you push on someone's chest, you start floating the other direction. So you have to leverage. We would put our feet up on the ceiling, put someone down on the seat, and you would be almost vertical doing the compressions.
I almost wonder if like bracing your arms up and doing like a foot pump.
We tried that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
You can do this. You have a little bit more leverage if you just invert yourself. Put your feet up on the ceiling, and you're inverted doing, because a little more coordination with your hands.
Were you guys laughing your ass off?
Oh, laughing! Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah,
it's tiring too, because it takes more force.
Yeah.
Than using your weight to do a compression.
And is every second of everything going on inside that capsule being recorded?
Yeah.
So, like, are you guys fucking with each other and cracking jokes? Like,
oh yeah.
Are there times where you guys don't get along?
No, we got along. I mean,
it's only 5 days, but
yeah, we had a great crew. We all got along. I mean, that's a huge concern for
like the space station. Like the crew that was there, stuck there for 8 months.
Which is funny.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you do if you fucking hate somebody?
That is a serious, especially now you throw 100 passengers in one of these starships.
Yeah.
Heading, in a crew of 5 or 6 who are responsible for those 100 passengers. And now people are throwing up everywhere and
fighting each
freaking
other.
out and claustrophobic and fighting.
Yeah.
That's real dynamics you got to figure out.
I mean, it makes me think almost like on an aircraft carrier, like you would need the logistics of an entire city almost. You would need some sort of law enforcement or some ability to keep the peace. Because, yeah, if you have, 2 dudes get into a fight or, somebody stabs somebody else, I mean, how do you handle that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you can turn around. It's not like being on a plane where you divert to Albuquerque and throw the guy off the fucking plane.
Right.
It's like, I mean, it's all stuff that you don't think about until you do, and then you're like, fuck, I don't know how we would deal with that. But it has to be dealt with.
It has to be dealt with, for sure.
I guess in that same vein, did you guys practice any, like if you get a significant laceration, like how you would address that? Like, are you cutting yourself and then having to fix it? Or
No, we didn't do it.
No self-mutilation?
Well, the only blood we drew, actually, no, we did finger pricks, but it's a concern because now you have fluid floating around everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and even just trying to close it, I think, would be difficult.
Yeah, we nothing more than a pinprick.
Yeah.
This was, we put a device on our shoulder to take blood, and we tested blood. We did a pharmaceutical test where we aspirin, take our blood every interval, and now you're doing that on the ground before and during and after flight, and you're assessing what the concentration of that drug in your body. And actually, it's more potent in space than it was before and after. So you're figuring out stuff like that.
So like a medication would be far more potent in space than it would be here.
was the result of this test. I'm sure they do. They tested all the drugs we brought up were exposed to a vacuum, radiation, all that stuff, and they brought all the unused drugs back and they tested those, and they, lack of the correct terminology, they depleted their potency.
Really?
I don't even know how to say that correctly.
Well, they lessened the efficacy of the
yes, there you go. That sounds smarter.
I pulled that out of my ass, but man, that's
Dr.
fascinating.
Mike.
Yeah, well, doctor.
Doctor.
Not a doctor, but I play one on TV. That's really fascinating. I mean, again, that's something that you wouldn't think of. The burning question, and this is the 17-year-old me, you probably know where I'm going with this, but as challenging as something like CPR is getting laid in space, like, is that, first of all, with the space station, that has to have had happened at this point, right?
I wouldn't know, Mike.
Well, but I mean, you can guess. You've been there. Like you'd have a way better idea if it's happened than I would.
I honestly,
But it would,
I do not know.
but it would probably be difficult, right? If CPR is that tricky, wouldn't having sex in space also be probably
Sure.
similar? Sure. Is this making you uncomfortable? I mean, I will say that I promise you, I'm not the only motherfucker asking that, or wondering. That's what most knuckle draggers down here on Earth are wondering.
Anything physically exerting is more difficult.
Yeah.
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 Even floating. I mean,
Yeah, that'd be a nightmare afterwards. We'll just leave it at that.
and mark that tape.
I was curious. So everything's being recorded. Creature comforts that you brought. I'm assuming they gave you like a list of what to bring, what not to bring, or whatever. Or did they? Did you bring anything like extra? Did they allow you to bring like 3 accessory items of whatever you want?
So we had our standard clothes, garments they packed, and toiletries. They took care of all that stuff. We were given a little satchel. It was literally a lunchbox size. You could fit whatever shit you could fit in that bag is what you could bring. You know, sentimental items, wedding rings, jewelry,
Pistol.
coins, pistol.
In case you run into some fucking alien.
What I brought, I want to bring, again, lover of sports. I'm like, any item I could kind of donate and inspire. So I brought a baseball, trying to give that away to the Red Sox. So if anyone from the Red Sox is listening, I have a baseball to give you guys. Puck, brought a hockey puck I gave to the Bruins.
They took it already?
They did.
That's cool.
They did. I brought a brick of silver.
Really?
Yes. So here's my idea on the brick of silver. We took videos and we engraved the Olympic rings on the side of it. So the idea is this has been higher, faster, further than any other, and now they take that brick and they melt it down and put it into their metals.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's because we have this, this inspirational message of pushing boundaries and the envelope and going further than anyone. That's obviously very similar to the higher, faster, stronger Olympic motto. So I'm going to donate that brick. What else did I bring?
Was it like a 10 ounce or was it bigger than that? Or
it was like 100 ounces.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty big. Floats.
Yeah.
We got some really cool footage of the brick floating.
Yeah. Did you bring a personal camera?
We had iPhones.
Really?
In fact, they turned on the Starlink and they're like, we're going to do some testing for the first few days. And they're like, hey, I think your internet's working, your Wi-Fi. Can you jump on and see if it's working? And they're like, you guys want to call your families?
Man, that's cool.
So we literally get on our iPhones and I call my wife, FaceTime.
She doesn't answer.
The pool man answers. We don't have a pool. No, she answers. And then she's like, oh my God, so we patched in the kids. The kids were at school. I got my oldest, she's at Northeastern University, freshman. She's in class. She answers. And then I got 2 in high school. She's a junior and a freshman boy. And they're literally like, answer the phone, and then they're like asking the teacher, "Do you mind if can I go outside?" And
Man, I would want to show everybody.
no, the teacher's like, "No, you're gonna answer your phone right here, and so we can all watch."
That is so fucking cool.
Yeah, so she took a screenshot of us talking for the first time. I'm inverted on the picture.
Man, dude, what an experience, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I'm looking around the room, and we're all on the phone talking, whatever it is, FaceTime, to our families, traveling 17,500 miles an hour over Europe, and 5 minutes later we're over India. And I think back to like when I first met my wife. I was in Korea. She came out to visit. Her brother was an F-16 pilot, and we kind of hit it off. So, but for us to communicate was those MCI calling cards, and we'd have like 5 minutes to talk. And I deployed to Kuwait after we got engaged. Deployed to Kuwait for 90 days, and we got married as soon as I got back. To plan the wedding for those 90 days, we talked twice over a 5-minute period. So point being is like, that's how we struggled to communicate. AOL didn't exist, or it was just coming off online, whatever. So we had no way to communicate, on the planet. But here I am now in space, FaceTiming my family. I think the funniest text I got was from my son. He's like, he's a runner. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, nice spacewalk. Can I get some Nike Vaporfly shoes?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, there's a humble moment for me." I'm like, "Sure." Yeah. So here I'm parenting from, 1,400 kilometers up. And
If that's not like you have the coolest fucking dad experience for a kid in high school, I don't know what is. There's nothing trumping that. Do you have a favorite picture that you took from up there?
I think I have a couple.
Can you share those? Can we put?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I wanted to ask too about the 17.5 speed. Do you have any concept of that when you're doing it, or is it like impossible to kind of wrap your arms around?
It's impossible. In a fighter jet, people are like, "Oh, how fast does the F-16 go?" Mach 2, 2 times the speed of sound, 1,500 miles an hour. But you're doing that so high, typically. It's really not that sexy. It's like, you can't really tell. It's when you get on the deck, a couple hundred feet, and you're going 400 miles an hour, 500 miles an hour. That is intense. That ground rush you feel. Same kind of thing when you're traveling 17.5. I mean, there's movement across the ground, but you're so high up, it's really difficult to really get a sense of how fast that is. Until like you look outside, there's, New England. And then 5 minutes later, you look and we're coming up on Ireland. So it's like, okay, put in context, that's pretty fast.
Yeah. Other than the haze of a city, was there a discernible, recognizable man-made feature or features that you recognized at the lowest point?
Where we were in our orbits, the times we really wanted to try to make out things that people talked about, we were either too high where we were in our orbit, or it was night. Because we looked for the pyramids, we looked for the Great Wall, we looked for, I could see towns. Like we passed over New England, I looked and tried to find my hometown, Portsmouth area. I could see that easily. I could see the port, and so you could see buildup of cities, but you could never. I never made out a specific like man-made structure.
I assume, if you would go to Mars, I assume you would love to go back and do that or something like that again. Do you have any plans to do that, or? No,
We'll leave it. It's a young man and woman's game at this point.
Check that box.
Our follow-up missions, Jared was nominated to our commander, our crew member. He was selected to be the NASA administrator by Trump. He had his hearing last week in front of the Senate committee, the Commerce, Space, and Science Committee. So it looks like he will run NASA here in a couple weeks. So that puts our Polaris mission 2 and 3 on hold for indefinite.
Do you have any desire or would you accept any position if he said, "Hey, will you come to NASA and do X for me"?
I already said no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're done with everything and want to ride up?
You know, I got to reprioritize the family.
Yeah.
I kind of put them through hell the last couple years, training for space and constantly coming and going. Our training was in California. The program went a lot longer than anticipated based on the development of the spacesuit. All the combat deployments for the last 20 years, you know, I was kind of an absentee for a while. So I'm 51 now, and, you know, the kids are, until they're fully cooked. I got 2 in high school. Yeah. I mean, you know how it is with kids.
Yeah, my youngest graduates next month, so
nice.
Be a weird next chapter for me for sure. You know, it's an important aspect that I don't think a lot of people consider, even myself included, like with the, you know, Dad of the Year comment of being able to give them an experience like that, but that comes with an enormous price tag leading up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something for especially high school kids to have a hard time probably grasping and rationalizing and understanding kind of the bigger picture of that. Was there any resentment or any issues, like significant issues that it brought to your family doing this, or they all kind of were on board and understood?
They know me, and they're very resilient. They've moved like 12, 15 times, depending on which kid you ask, over the years. So they're very dynamic and adaptable to their circumstances and environment. I don't think there's much resentment. It's very difficult on our marriage, you know, Kristen and I, be completely honest. And she deserves to have me home and, you know, having a stable lifestyle versus making a commute to DC or moving to DC, God forbid. It's definitely the right thing to do, and she needs to be first and foremost at this point.
No, I mean, that's incredibly commendable. You know, no two ways about it. Not that you would from the sounds of it now, but if you could create your own space mission, what would it be? Where would you go and why?
Wow. Out of something that's the realm of possible at this point?
Yeah.
Like Mars and closer kind of thing, or?
I mean, you're the astronaut.
Oh, geez.
Fuck if I know.
I know. They just did the polar orbits. That was kind of cool with Fram 2. Most recent commercial flight took us over the poles, which has never been done before. I think going around the moon would be pretty cool. You know, the one concept that we were pitching for our second mission was to more or less save Hubble. Hubble's got a lot of issues. It doesn't have many years left. And the idea was to dock with Hubble, get out, repair it, and then give it a boost and send it further out in orbit to, you know, sustain life and provide more science. That would have been a cool mission. But I think moon would be really cool.
I've asked you everything that's come to my mind space-wise, several of which I'm sure either you weren't expecting or hoping I wouldn't ask. But what haven't I asked, and what else would you, I guess, say about the entire space experience? If there's anything that we haven't covered.
I think you haven't touched upon anything that's worthy of sharing. You know, that's the reason why we do these missions is truly to inspire. And I'm living proof that you don't have to be that, you know, A+ engineer, technical background, dedicating your life to that one pursuit. I never dreamed I would have this opportunity. And if I had to boil it down to what got me here, is part of it's just the relationships I've built, how important it is not to burn bridges and to be able to simply have a conversation and communicate with somebody and not, you know, talk about yourself, although we've done that for the last 4 hours.
Well, there's kind of a lot to talk about.
Yeah. But the other thing is just sacrifice. You know, not like things were handed to me. I had to earn the shit that I've been able to do. And it's certainly wasn't gravy. It took a lot of sacrifice to achieve these accomplishments. It's just going to take effort and time for people if they want to achieve these goals. But about space, it was certainly life-changing. And I hope that more and more people get to experience it in the future, which I think is inevitable.
I mean, it's such a remarkable story, and for me to be able to ask you all the things that I've wanted to ask and hear you tell your story is both humbling and an absolute honor to be able to do it. Understanding, or I guess coming to grips with having to prioritize, family for kind of the next chapter. What is next for you professionally?
Professionally, just sharing my story, speaking. I enjoy getting out there telling about my experiences and what I learned from these things. Putting the family first. Working out a lot. I got a couple Ironmans this summer.
A couple of them. Any one in particular you're most excited about?
I did Ironman Chattanooga 2 weeks after space.
How was that?
It was brutal.
Yeah.
But
the toughest one you've done?
Yeah, the most painful one, I would say. But I qualified for the World Championships, which are in Nice, France.
Oh, wow.
So I'll do, I signed up for Lake Placid, New York.
Oh, wow.
And then I'll go to Nice, France.
What bike do you ride and what shoes do you wear?
Oh, I'm a Hoka guy for the shoes.
I have
I love the...
Yeah, I have no arch. I can't wear them. I've tried.
No?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried every fucking...
Even with inserts?
Especially with inserts. Like, I don't know if my feet are fucking retarded or what, but they're flat, and the more inserts or higher the arch in whatever I'm wearing, the worse it is. Which is actually one of the reasons I like these shoes so much, is because there's very little in it. But I like flat-footed Chuck Taylor kind of.
That's what I wear. It's Chuck Taylors.
Yeah,
the low-profile Chucks.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking for a bike. I have a felt tri-bike. Living in Italy for 6 years, riding in the Dolomites at the Giro. It was an amazing experience living there.
Did you ever go up and do any of the Tour de France legs?
Never done any of the legs. We're planning on going to check out the race, but
man, just to reiterate, like, to be able to interview you and sit down and ask you everything that I'm curious about and that I know a lot of other people are, is as remarkable as it is humbling, and it's just a complete and total honor to be able to do it. I can't begin to thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule to come here and give us this opportunity to talk to you, because it's been fascinating, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. It means a lot to me.
Yeah. In that same vein, we've got some parting gifts.
Oh, boy.
Now, it's not a block of silver that you can take, but if you ever find yourself in space, maybe take what's in the black box. Big thanks to John Johnston and Champion Choice Silver for, you can open that up if you want.
Holy cow.
Yes, it's to commemorate being on the show. It's a mic drop shit kicker belt buckle. So,
dude.
I don't know if you rock buckles.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I have a Thunderbird one.
Oh, sweet.
Cheyenne Frontier Days. I've been wearing it since 2008.
Oh, nice.
It's about to get replaced.
Well, that's super humbling. Awesome. Love to see a picture of it if you ever find yourself wearing it. And
I almost wore it today, but
awesome. Good stuff.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Again, thank you for everything. Thanks for your service to the country, for dedicating yourself for years to space exploration and doing things for the greater good of humanity. And again, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.